Welcome to Baseball and Coffee, episode 13 with Tino and Aaron. How's it going, Aaron?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, man. Today, we're going to cover our SP2 rankings, which are pitchers 17 through 32. We'll talk about our favorite SP2, one riser and one faller for each, and then open it up for a little prospect talk, a little bit of trades, and our open forum segment. You got any coffee stories for the week?
No, I've been drinking. I treated myself. I bought a half pound of Papua New Guinea Starbucks Reserve. I've been brewing that last couple nights of the work week, and it's just Papua New Guinea is one of the more rare coffees in the world, and it's been a while since I've thrown down my own money because I get coffee for my job for a coffee, but yeah, I just love that coffee. It's just got such complexity. It's really balanced and nice acidity. And that's what I've been enjoying. I would encourage anyone who's never had a Papua New Guinea, if you see one, try it because they're just phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. So I had what's my favorite espresso based beverage this week. I treated myself to an Italiano, which is, for those who don't know, is essentially an Americano with less water. So the way I like it is 2 shots of espresso with about another 2 to 3 ounces of hot water. It's obviously stronger than an Americano, but it's not straight espresso. And but it was interesting because I went to my favorite, Walla Walla Roastery coffee shop, and they typically do a very good job. This time their shots were a little bit longer than what I would like. Some people like the shots a little bit longer, but for me, the takes away a little bit of the sweetness and gives it a little bit more, sometimes a little bit more depth, but takes away some of the viscosity as well. And so the Italiano made me happy, but it wasn't perfect. Do you have a favorite espresso drink?
I'm with you. I typically get an Americano with light water.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget sometimes that it has that name. But yeah, I think more in the higher end shops, that's something that's more common. Yeah, that's typically what I get if I get an espresso drink, because I just like brew coffee. I like, like a short, I'll drink like a short, like flat white as well.
Mm-hmm.
I really like oat milk has been more prevalent. I really enjoy that much more than like the nut milks. They can be a little flat and a little harsh. But if I want something creamy, which honestly isn't too often, I'll go for a flat white with oat milk or something like that. But yeah, I like the Americano, easy on the wire, so nice and strong.
Mm-hmm. It definitely felt like a treat having it, though, even though it wasn't pulled to perfection. And not that I expected that every time, but it felt like a treat. For me, that's like my version of 2 scoops of ice cream or a huge slice of cake or, slice of cheesecake or something like that. And having coffee out in that way is a pretty fun experience for me. All right, trades. So we've had a boatload of trades go down in our Fantrax League over the last week or so, but we chose to highlight just a couple of them that you and I were involved in. I'd like to ask you first. You traded Alek Manoah, starting pitcher, Toronto Blue Jays, 24 years old, nice pitch mix, 3 quality pitches, but pitches in the AL East, for Joe Musgrove, who we've talked about a little bit already, starting pitcher, San Diego Padres. And you made this trade with Brandon, who is, I think, kind of on par with you and I as far as his understanding and acceptance and grasping of numbers and some of the underlying metrics. So I saw this as a pretty big challenge trade. That's what, if we were to trade, say, top 10 prospect for top 10 prospect, I would call that a challenge trade as well. So this is a fun one. And I'm really interested in hearing your perspective as to why you traded Alek Manoah and got Joe Musgrove back.
Yeah, I think it started out as a conversation just to try to find out where each other was on each pitcher and like how much they valued them. And what we found in our conversation was that he valued Manoa a little bit more than I did. So when I got that sense, I just wanted to see what he would return. And I like Musgrove more for 2022. I think that from my perspective, the thing that gives me pause is the longer term, the dynasty aspect of the trade.
Mhm.
I think thinking beyond more than 1 or 2 years is probably not super wise when it comes to pitchers, because injuries and context can change. But for 2022, I feel like Musgrove is an upgrade for me. I really like Manoa. He has a fantastic pitch, which we talked about last episode with his slider. But to me, he's a little bit less of a finished product than Musgrove. I see Musgrove is really coming into his own. He's also shown that he can handle the workload. He's exhibited multiple years of increased innings that sort of build up. Tiebreakers in this instance, I like his division context and ballpark context better. But honestly, those are tiebreakers. It really comes down to the skill of the pitcher. And for me, they're similar velocity, but Musgrove has a deeper pitch mix, and he just checks more boxes for me, I think. And there's a good chance in 2 years, 3 years, Manoa may check more of those boxes, and I may regret letting him go. But I think for 2022, I saw as a kind of improvement on the margins, and also just investing in a pitcher who I think has a potential to impact my ability to compete this year. So I gave up a little bit of the dream of what Manoa might be if he's able to deepen his arsenal beyond that slider, for a player that I think who I see kind of in his peak, I guess. Manoa, I think, is pre-peak. I think Musgrove is, and whatever that's going to look like for him, he's just entering it. So I'm excited. I was excited to get him.
It was a very interesting trade for me, and I think my intuition about why you would trade for Musgrove, I think was right, in that he's at peak and has a little bit more security in his innings pitched and durability. Manoa is interesting in that he had 3 pitches that had a negative run value, meaning they were 3, from a result standpoint, 3 result positive pitches in his fastball, slider, and sinker. What I think is interesting about both pitchers is that they both have plus pitches that are a little bit less conventional, in that Musgrove his 2+ pitches currently are slider and curveball. And so his pitch mix is going to go a long ways to determine whether he makes that jump up to SP1 like we think he can. Whereas Manoa is trying to figure out, kind of how to throw the fastball, slider, and sinker. And they all 3 got decent results last year, with the slider being his best pitch. But I'm with you. I think the context is the determining factor. I tend to put a little bit more, I think, than you do in terms of into defense and into home park, and having that player or pitcher in the NL West, who's going to face Colorado. Although Colorado's home park isn't great, Colorado's offense is not. Arizona, San Francisco and LA are good teams, but you're playing in big parks. And so that versus a 24-year-old with just over 100 innings in Toronto, I will take the San Diego Padres starter over the Toronto Blue Jays starter over and over again. I was a little surprised that Brandon was willing to make this trade, and that Brandon is one of the probably handful of managers that I think will be competing for the championship this year. There's obviously something about Manoa that he likes. But this was a fun trade for me. I think it's an exciting one. It's a challenge trade. We could look back on this trade at the end of the year and say, you guys traded an SP2 for an SP2, and it made a lot of sense. I do think Musgrove makes that next jump and does become a top 15 starter this year, because I think it's a simple tweak with pitch mix for him, but it's going to be exciting to see. And it was a trade that it's one of those that comes up on your phone and you see it and you're like, wow, that's a fun one. Like, I like that one. That one's super cool.
Yeah, again, it was a fun conversation. I always enjoy interacting with Brandon, and it's, for me, I don't know what your experience is, but I feel like for every 5 conversations, I might have one thing that actually something comes tangible from it. And then
Mhm.
like of that one time, 3 times, like one times out of 3 might actually be the play you asked about. More times than not, it's like conversation goes in a different direction. But um, yeah, it just, once he kind of was amenable to moving Musgrove, I just got really excited.
Mhm.
Because I think at some point you have to trust your process, right? And he just it's letting go of, I think in fantasy, you just get attached to names, you get attached to ceiling, you get it, and what guys could be. And at some point you just have to say, okay, I want to look, what do my numbers tell me? Who is the better player? Um, and go with that. So
It's a
I'm proud of
it's a good
myself that I was able
segue. It's a
to.
good segue into the next trade because I tend to hold on to uh, ceiling and potential way more than I should. I've historically had teams that are just 30 players with high ceilings and not enough players who I can count on who have history. And so I also traded with Brandon. I gave up my round 1 pick 4, which is the equivalent to a round 16, but it really, the way I saw this pick was I'm giving up the opportunity to potentially pick Seiya Suzuki as my outfield, well, 2 until Acuna comes back, and then my outfield 3. There are other positions that I needed to fill, like first and second base, but Suzuki was the player that I had targeted and I thought would be realistic here. And so in giving up that pick in our upcoming draft, I received Carlos Rodon and his 7th round pick, well, a first pick in the 7th round. Thought process was similar to what you said. In prepping for this podcast, our starting pitcher 2, I kept coming back to Rodon's statistics and thinking to myself, how the heck can this guy be available, right? You look at his numbers and I know the answer. The answer is health. But you look at his numbers and he, in a smaller sample size, he's the closest we have to DeGrom. And he just signed with San Francisco. And so even if I get 100 and say I get last year's statistics or something close to it, I get 130 innings, 12 strikeouts per 9, a mid-2s ERA, that's very much worth the pick 1-4 in our upcoming draft, as far as I'm concerned. And because I roster Jack Flaherty and I was considering keeping him, when he came down with an injury, I wanted to make a move to solidify my pitching staff. And so Rodon was one that I had targeted. Interestingly, this offer was on the table for me almost a week ago. We had talked Rodon and he never took the offer down. And I never declined the offer because I was still thinking on it. And so it was kind of funny that it took me about 6 days. But again, as I started to tear into the numbers, I know that he's had TJ and he's had shoulder fatigue, basically every year since 2017. But his fastball had a minus 26 run value and was the #1 overall pitch in baseball last year from a
Yeah,
run value.
I saw that run value on that pitch.
So hitters hit 199 against his fastball, 205 expected batting average, 336 slug, and a 369 X slug, and had a 29.7% whiff rate. And for a fastball, which you typically expect to be a higher batting average pitch than the slider and the curve, that's a phenomenal fastball. And he threw it 58.7% of the time. So if you're throwing a pitch almost 60% of the time and getting an under 200 batting average on it, that's a good place to start. And that's not to say, and his slider had a minus 12 run value as well and was the number 14 slider in all of baseball. So he's got 2 great pitches to start with. He's pitching in San Francisco. So one other thing to add, I'm not trying to defend my trade as much as I'm just excited about Carlos Rodon being on my team.
As you should be.
So he's previously pitching on the south side of Chicago at Guaranteed Rate Field for the White Sox. And it has a rolling 3-year park factor for hitters of 100 and a home run rate of 118 versus right-handed hitters. So if you assume, say, 80% of the hitters Rodon is facing are right-handed, at home, their home run rate, park factor wise, was 118. At Oracle in San Francisco, his new home, it's had a rolling park factor of 95, and the home run rate for right-handed hitters at Oracle over 3 years is 77. So you're talking about, what's that, 41, a reduction of 41 in the home run rate for right-handers in his home park. And it's not that home runs have been his bugaboo as much as, for him as a semi-fly ball pitcher and strikeout pitcher, you're going to have fly balls go to die that were previously home runs for him. So again, if I can get just even 150 innings from him at this level of production, I'll be dancing in the streets. I was really excited about this trade. What did you think when you saw the trade?
I have quite a bit I want to share when we go through our ranks. So I'll save some of the pitch tech and the pitcher skill element. I think what intrigued me, or I'll say for this section, is more the managerial and decision about the draft pick. And that's that was my thought process. So when I saw the trade on my phone was Tino values what Rodon more than anyone that he can get in the first round, because it's interesting what the spread of picks you have. You had that first pick in the 4th overall, I think, and then you don't pick again until the 5th. So that was your one spot to take someone who that you really felt like could be a key point to your team. So you're giving that up to secure Rodon, which you could argue either way. We don't exactly know what the field will look like because we haven't declared our keepers, but I think for me, valuing pitching, securing Rodon, I'm very, as we'll talk about, I'm pretty high on him as well. So I think the only other pitcher you could argue it might have been available that could be comparable is Verlander, but he's 38 and coming off major surgery. So and so there's some question marks with both of those pitchers, but I don't disagree with your choice by any means. But that was what was compelling to me, was giving him the ability to choose the 4th player off the board over what you're going to get. It's almost like you selected him with that first pick. And that was what was interesting to me from a process and management standpoint.
That's how I saw it. I saw Rodon as being a better pick for my team than whatever I would have gotten at for. And so that was my pick 1-4.
Yeah.
One quick point on Verlander, and it relates to what we talked about the last couple of weeks, is I know he's great, and I know we rostered him in TGFBI. I don't want to root for Justin Verlander. He's not a pitcher that I've ever enjoyed. I didn't enjoy him in Detroit, even though I've lived in Detroit. And he is pitching for the Astros, who are essentially the Mariners' arch rival. And so that line to be drawn from a fandom standpoint is much closer to rational than it ever has been for me. As I get older, I become more rational about taking players on rival teams. Verlander still kind of crosses that line for me, at least as far as my home league goes.
So your top 3 starters now are Rodon, Ray, and Wheeler.
Correct. In a 16-team league, correct. And I like that.
None of those were on your roster to start this coming out of 2021.
They weren't. It's really, so coming out of 21, just to dig a little bit deeper, I realized that what I thought my skill level was as far as evaluating pitchers and finding pitching was much lower than actual. And I had some work to do in studying and learning more about how to evaluate pitching. And I would always say to myself, pitchers get hurt, just keep your hitters, select pitchers in the draft, after keeping 15. And this offseason, I realized that a lot of the good pitchers are going to be kept. And the probability of me finding, say, 2 or 3 star up and coming pitchers who were not kept is not very high. And so I need to find a way to secure some good, predictable starting pitching heading into the draft, so that when I'm taking a shot at the next up and coming pitcher, it's a risk that if it doesn't work out, my team is still going to be good. So, and for me, that was in lieu of keeping some hitting prospects that I might have liked.
Yeah.
So it's a shift in philosophy and also an opportunity to implement some of the learnings that I've had over this past off season. It was hard. It's a hard pill to swallow because it's admitting to yourself that your ability to evaluate is not what you thought it was, and there was something to learn. But trading for Ray, Wheeler, and Rodon is reflective of that perspective for me. I'm also lucky that I have Logan Gilbert, and I think Gilbert as a 4 in a league this deep is a good place to be.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, so the trade I went into bring to the table to discuss is a little bit more multifaceted. So Matt, who's been on the podcast, traded 2 prospects, Jose Barrero and Robert Hassel, for a slew of draft picks, a 6th and 11th this year and a 7th next year. So what's interesting to me about this from a management perspective is, and I know what I do, I want to question the return that Matt got. Or that's less interesting to me, more so just like, what is the value of these types of players? Because we talk so much about prospects and their role in dynasty, and building a roster and building a winning roster. And, you know, for me, maybe I'm higher on Barrero than I should be. I don't know where you are on him, but to me, he's plus defense, plus speed, plus power. And if the hit tool comes and he can get to those other tools, he's in integrate context as well. He's a pretty exciting player. Usually sometimes you have to give up something with the bat to get that kind of defense. And he may have that rare opportunity to do a little bit of both. So, and then Robert Hassel was a 1st round pick, farther away, obviously, but I'm pretty sure he was both in our top 10 outfielders when we did outfield prospects. So Matt has a slew of prospects that he may value them less. And so I was just curious your take on, you know, if you got both of these players, would you be holding them for the long term? Or, you know, and then what you thought of getting 3 draft picks for players. You know, there wasn't a top 5 5th round pick or 5th or higher pick or any of these guys. So it was just interesting to think about from a management perspective. I wonder what your take would be, because I think you always have an interesting perspective on prospects and managing them.
Obviously, it's dependent on where you are in your build. And so Matt trading those guys away means that he saw them as probably his first cuts. So he kept 15, and then that's cuts probably 16 and 17 or somewhere in that range. Barrero is an interesting one because he performed really well in the futures game last year and then came up and played pretty well at the end of the year. Power speed guy. To your point, probably the starting shortstop in Cincinnati for a while in a great hitter's park. If you don't have a shortstop and you have space to roster him, I think that's great. I don't see star potential in him. And I think the theme for me in with Barrero and Hassel and some of the conversations I've had with Matt are that when taking prospects are volatile, right? We all know that we can dream on their potential, but they're not, most of them don't work out, at least to that highest upside potential. And if the ceiling, my perspective is, if the ceiling is not that high, right? If I'm looking at Barrero and he will probably peak at somewhere around, say, between top 6 to 12 for shortstop, is that worth investing in right now, that upside? And then with Hassel, you know, we can see Hassel as a 15 to 20 home run, probably 20 steal type of guy. And we don't necessarily know what his hit tool looks like yet. And he's got a couple years to go before he gets there. But it's, if you look at outfielders with those kinds of statistics, you want to keep a player 1 out of 15 slots who's not going to be up for another couple of years to get Andrew Benintendi or Tommy Pham, who are 2020 guys. And so if that's his ceiling, he's not worth keeping as far as I'm concerned. Those keeper slots,
300, you know.
Right. But those keeper slots for me, with minor leaguers, are reserved for the highest ceiling guys. Otherwise, go find someone who's already done it. And so for Matt to acquire pickup grades for those 2 players, I think was very smart. Now, someone else may see Hassel and Barrero in a different light. And if you see either of those two or both of them as potential stars, I say, I'm all for it. Go for it. But, you know, there's a reason why I liked Christian Hernandez and Elijah Green and Julio Rodriguez 2 years ago and George Kirby. These are high upside guys who could be top three at their position at their peak. Those are the guys worth investing in for me. So I would not have traded for Barrero or Hassel, especially if I knew Matt was going to cut them. I would be looking to draft them kind of mid rounds in our upcoming draft.
I'm interested too in the trade. The team he traded to was Miguel's team, and he's an Angels fan. So he has a lot of Angels, but he's also just been a really active owner in the last 18 months and has really added a lot of players. So interesting to see what his roster cut down looks like and who he keeps, and both these guys stay on his roster. And I would assume so, that he's going to keep them. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Sure. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I appreciate the perspective. Let's move on.
All right. So we're going to move on to SP2. I have written down here to talk about injuries and Flaherty ? But that one's a depressing one. And for anybody listening, I'm letting him go. Even if he comes back in 2 weeks, I'm done with him. I've been waiting for Flaherty to have a full season for the last couple of years. So bye, Jack Flaherty.
A couple other quick injuries. Urias was quad. This is a minimum of 2 weeks, but if you follow Milwaukee, it's probably going to be more. They tend to be a little bit more cautious with soft tissue injuries. So he's someone who I know you and I both like, and he's in the pool in our league. So we're interested to see how that affects his, how he's valued in the draft. And then also Barrero, who we just talked about, he has a fractured hamate. So his ability to take that shortstop job coming out of camp will obviously not be there. So that's a little bit of a downer. And then on Justin Verlander, who we just also mentioned above, pitched 2 innings, had a really good, come out clean, and he's going to pitch again on Wednesday. So kind of on the more positive recovering side of injuries, I thought that was interesting to note that he got on the mound, he looked good. And so to me, he's someone that continues to be interesting going into our draft of how he'll be valued. I told Brandon the other day, I was like, I'm a glutton because I have these pitchers and I'm pissed I don't have a chance to draft him.
Right.
I don't even need him, and I still want him.
With Urias is interesting because he's a player that I've targeted at my opening at second base. He's on the short list, and I was actually not happy that he got hurt, but from a draft value standpoint, he could potentially get pushed down a little bit because he won't be available at the beginning of the year, but you could still get 130 games from him.
Right.
So my hope is he does slide to round 5 and I'm able to roster him as my starting second baseman, which I don't think I would have had the opportunity to do had he stayed healthy. So I saw that from my own team as a bit of positive news. Not to reveal too many secrets here, but it's so
unfortunately, I thought, I'm not proud. I had the same thoughts. I'm like, well, that might push his stock down a little bit. He might be less valued. He might
exactly.
It's a horrible thing to think, but I did think it as well.
Right. Injuries happen, right? And you have to assess value. All right. So we're moving on to SP2. I did tier mine, but I don't expect it. I didn't put that on the outline, so I don't expect you to. Who are your top 4 starters here in SP2?
Yeah, so I have a couple guys down here from a skill standpoint shouldn't be here, but I pushed them down out of my SP1 range, thinking specifically in a 16-team redraft, and taking your first starter and what I prioritize innings and also health. So Peralta and DeGrom are my first 2 here, but again, they really shouldn't be here from a skill perspective. But it was more I eliminated them from SP1 conditions because of the innings with Freddie and the DeGrom with the health. So those we've talked about mostly on the last pod. I put Peralta over DeGrom because Peralta offers similar. Obviously when DeGrom's on the mound, he has no peers, but you still get swing and miss without the huge health risk. So DeGrom's K percentage was 45, which is just ridiculous, but Freddie's was 34, which is also pretty damn good. So for me, if I was looking for swing and miss, I would take the health of Freddie, knowing that both of them are going to have limited innings. And we talked a lot about Freddie. He checks so many boxes for me, what I'm looking for, and is an amazing player to roster and cheer for as well. And then my third pitcher in this tier is Rodon. And then my last one, the fourth, was Shohei. So not surprisingly, the top four of my players on my board today are the last four pitchers in my on my list that had a stuff plus over 109. So all these guys are sort of the last kind of upper premium stuff of the players on my board today. Rodon, we talked a lot about the opening of the pod. To me, what I see, as you already mentioned, the pitch quality. He's also my riser. He's someone, as I dug into this, he's being dropped down in terms of draft costs for redraft because of the question marks around his injury and his innings. But for me, I would take him above. I would take him over his ADP and take the risk because his swing strike rate was almost 17%. His K minus BB was 28%, and then his CR was sub 3 in a hitter part. So, and then he's going to a better team. And I think also from a health perspective, the San Francisco is in sort of the forefront of load management, recovery, management of injuries, keeping their guys healthy. They had a very old roster last year, but they also, in doing that, they kept them all in the field. They managed their workloads. They got the most out of them. So if any team can help him through science and medicine and recovery and rest to keep his shoulder as healthy as can be, it does give me some level of comfort if I was a Rodon owner, that was where he was going. So again, to me, I would pay the tax to get the elite swing and miss because he's my riser. So, and then Ohtani was the fourth one I had here. I think because of what he can do with the bat, sometimes what he does on the mound can be overlooked. So I'll stop there and ask you, who was your top four?
My top four in order were Charlie Morton, Carlos Rodon, Lance Lynn, and Kevin Gossman. I have a bit of a division between the top two and the bottom two. I think Morton and Rodon are much better bets than Lance Lynn and Kevin Gossman, but I like those four. Morton is one of those pitchers that, as I started to take apart, I just think there's a lot of ageism with him, that we look at him and he's 38 and we just say there's no way in hell he's going to be as great as he was last year. And then he comes out and he does it again.
Yeah.
His velocity was actually his average fastball was 95.3 last year, which is the second highest of his career. So his velocity is not going anywhere. He's obviously utilizing newer science and some training techniques to be able to continue to pitch well into his late 30s. But you look at his curveball, he had the number one curveball in baseball last year, and it was the number 5 pitch overall. And batters hit 127 and slugged 187 against the curve. And it's more of a east-west curve, which is interesting to me. Has 4% more vertical average movement than the average curveball did, but 55% more horizontal movement, which meant it moved 1.5 times as much from right to left than your average curveball did. And we all know that watching it, that it looks that way. He also throws his curveball 36.7% of the time. Mm-hmm. So he understands that it's a great pitch. And then his fastball also had a negative run value. Batters hit 230 against the curveball with a 355 slug. And as I said, he averaged 95.3 on that fastball. So he's got 2 great pitches. The other pitch that he throws, double-digit percentage, is his sinker at 13.5. Is actually not a good sinker. Had a +4 run value, and batters hit 330 against it, although the expected batting average was 266. But he's basically fastball curveball. He mixes in a little bit of a cutter and a little bit of a change as well. But he struck out 10.5 per 9 last year. His K rate was 28.6, and his K minus BB was 21%. And his whip was just above 1. You look at those numbers, and he's, if you go hitter with your first, say, 4 rounds in a 15 or 16 team league, getting Charlie Morton as your number one in the 5th round is a very, very good place to start. And if Charlie Morton was 25 or 24 years old, I think we would see him go closer to round 3 than round 5. So he's my number 1. Rodon is my number 2. We've talked about him enough. If he stays healthy, if he throws between, say, 140 and 180 innings, he's definitely in the top 10. Like I said, you look at his K minus BB, you look at his K rate, you look at the success of his fastball, and he belongs in the same area as Woodruff and DeGrom and those guys. He has those kinds of numbers. It's just a health question with him. Lance Lynn was fascinating. As I tore into Lance Lynn, his 3 pitches that he throws average between 88.7 and 94 miles an hour. So everything is in the same range from a velocity standpoint. He throws his fastball 42% of the time, his cutter 31% of the time, and his sinker 19.4% of the time. So he's a pitcher who tunnels very well. So everything coming out of his hand looks the same. And it's just a matter of, is it going to cut? Is it going to sink? Or is it going to rise a little bit? But his batting average against was very good. Against the sinker, it was 243, which is very low for a sinker. Cutter was 218 and fastball was 187. And he had 3 pitches that were -7 or better as far as run value. It's also been really consistent. He's thrown at least 156.2 innings every year since 2018. To me, he's a good bet to have a low to mid 3s ERA and 175 strikeouts. He's not sexy. He is, if he loses anything velocity wise, he's not going to be the same pitcher that he's been. But as long as you get what he was the last couple of years, he's a very good SP2. I would not want to start my fantasy rotation with him. Mm-hmm. But if he's your number 2, you're in a really good spot. And then the last one in these top 4 that I think we can have a lively debate about is Kevin Gausman. Another interesting pitcher. So much of this comes down to pitch mix. I think a lot of these SP2s have one dynamite pitch at least. And you start looking at the statistics for the other pitches and you realize that, yes, you need more pitches in your repertoire to set up that great pitch. But why are you throwing some of these other pitches, even dabbling in them? Gausman was the number 4 pick overall by the Orioles in 2012 and was supposed to be their ace, but he threw a slider a lot. And in 2019, he scrapped his slider and his career took off. And then in 21, he essentially scrapped his changeup and just went fastball splitter. And he had a career year. He does still throw the change in the slider, but only 12% of the time, and they're both meatballs. The pitch that's phenomenal for him is the split. Mm-hmm. So it averages 83.6 miles an hour. He throws it 35% of the time. Batters hit 133 against the splitter last year. And the expected batting average was 156, and they slugged 224. And he had a 46% whiff rate against the splitter. So essentially half the time they swung and missed. It had a -23 run value and was the number 1 split finger fastball in baseball last year and the number 3 pitch overall. Which brings us to the debate. You know, you look at his statistics, 22.8% K minus BB, 1.04 whip, almost 30% K rate. Why isn't he higher? We talked about this at length when we were debating Kevin Gausman to pick in TGFBI or NFBC, one of the two.
Probably both. I think I tried to talk you into.
So here's my argument. I love all those skills, and as long as he continues fastball splitter and doesn't dabble too much in the other pitches, I think he's going to continue to succeed. The Oracle home run park factor, 3 years rolling overall, both righty and lefty, is 75. Right, so it's 25% more difficult to hit home runs versus average in San Francisco, which is where he pitched last year and had his career year. Rogers Center is 115. So it's 15% easier for a batter to hit a home run in Rogers Center than average. And the only 2021 was the only year where he had a home run per 9 rate of lower than 1.21. So he does surrender home runs.
Yeah.
He's also going from NL West to AL East, which we've talked about at length. So the skills are there, yes. But his ERA, I see his ERA as probably being in the high 3s. I think that's worth 1 run coming off of a career year and context. He'll continue to strike out a ton of batters. But it's also, you're counting on that 1 year being what he does moving forward. I don't see Gausman as all that different than Rodon in some ways, right? They both have two really good pitches, but they're switching contexts. One is going from a hitting environment to a pitching environment. One's going from a pitching to a hitting.
Yeah, and both of them have a dominant pitch.
Right. The one, of course, the health is the one scary thing about Rodon, but the context is too rough for me. Obviously, all AL East teams need pitching, and Toronto has to roster 5 starters, but foreshadowing a little bit, there's a reason why Berrios is at the very bottom of this list for me. It's the same reason why Gausman is not higher, given his skill set. What do you think about Lynn and Gausman?
Lynn, I have at the head of a grouping that I kind of view as reliable volume, but a lot less swing and miss. I have guys that have a higher swinging strike rate above him. So I can speak to that when we get down to that level. I don't disagree with anything you said about his reliability. I just rank him lower just because he has less swinging strikes and less swing and miss in this game. Gausman, I think I'm just belaboring. I agree with you about the ERA going up, but I still see premium strikeouts, whip, and potential for wins given his team. So swing and miss, I think I value the swing and miss a little bit higher, and I still help you in whip. So yeah, I'm higher on him. He's gonna be fascinating to watch. I think most people will want to watch the Blue Jays to see their lineup. I think I'll be watching it because I want to see their pitchers. And this conversation we've had repeatedly about Gausman and see what they do with Kikuchi, see how Manoah develops. Yeah, I'm just really intrigued by their pitchers.
By the way, his changeup had a run value of +6, and he only threw his changeup 181 times last year, which means every changeup got hit.
Yeah, basically.
It's pretty bad. All right, next group of pitchers, unless you have anything more to add on Morton, Lynn, or Gausman.
I don't, no. And I'll speak to Ohtani when we do our favorites.
Of course. My next tier, I have 3 pitchers, Max Fried, Taylor Rogers, and Dylan Cease. This is kind of my young, reliable, well, not Cease, but Fried and Rogers seem to be pretty reliable, without a ton of track record yet, though. But pitchers that I would value kind of in the middle of my SP2 range. Max Fried is an interesting one. He's a sinker ball pitcher who is pitching. His context is good, pitching in Atlanta in that division, has a good offense behind him. He had 3 pitches that had a negative run value last year: fastball, curveball, slider. Fastball had a -10 run value, which was the 34th ranked fastball in baseball. He did surrender a 400 slug with that fastball, but is a pitch he threw about 39% of the time. And then his curve and his slider were great. Curveball surrendered a 160 average and a 253 slug. He's 28 years old, so he's not as young as you might think he is. But he has that combination of decent strikeouts and ground balls that we look for in our elite starting pitching. His ground ball percentage last year was 51.8%, which is well above average. He had a 3.04 ERA. If you wanted to pick nits a little bit, his K-BB is 17.5% or 17.5. You like to look for it above 20% in this range, but he's proven enough over the last couple of years that he's worth the pick in this range. Interestingly, he's hit 165.2 innings in each of the last 2 full seasons exactly. So to me, he's a pitcher who's not going to be a huge help with strikeouts, but is going to give you somewhere around 15 wins given the context, and is someone that you can count on. Where do you have Fried?
I'm laughing because I originally had him in this range,
Uh-huh.
and I just kept like, okay, push him down, push him down. Like I kept, as I went through the pitchers, I would kept moving him down, and then basically at the end of the day, he didn't even make my list.
What was your reason for pushing him down?
He just didn't stand out in any area. The only thing that you can really say for him is he will likely get decisions because he plays on a good team and he will go deep enough into games to get decisions. But from a skills perspective and a swing and miss, I just kept devaluing him, and I would view him as like a great number 3 or 4 starter. But when I kept comparing him to, the Kershaws and Giolitos and Biebers and Rays and McClanahan, like I would rather take those guys and their strikeouts, and they could post probably better ratios based on their skills. And you get all the strikeouts. So I just found myself continuing to devalue him, and I was just surprised because he is someone that I think of as a quality pitcher, who has pretty deep pitch mix and good ground ball lean, plays for a good team. But from a skills perspective, I just kept pushing him down because the players who I was comparing against, I felt like have a stronger skill set.
So you would take Kershaw over Fried?
I would.
Interesting. Because Fried, the other interesting thing that just popped into my head is I remember playing Dynasty baseball, like Stratomatic, when I was young, and a 9 strikeouts per 9 was like a huge deal, right?
Yeah.
Very few pitchers struck out a batter an inning. And if you did, those were more reserved for relievers. And if they did, it was great. These days, we look at Fried, who was 8.6 strikeouts per 9, as someone who doesn't have enough strikeouts for our liking in building a rotation. So it's interesting how baseball has moved so far in that direction. I would take Fried over Kershaw. I think it would depend on the rest of my staff or what I thought I was going to select with the rest of my staff. I think Kershaw has a little bit more upside than Fried does if he's healthy. But this is one of those that I think very clearly illustrates your framework and thresholds that you have as far as evaluating pitching. And for me, I don't have as strict of guardrails as you do when I'm looking at starting pitching. And so I think Max Fried is a great illustration of that. And I don't think that the one way is better than the other. I just think it's 2 different ways of looking at pitching. I agree. His K-minus BB was low. His swinging strike rate was pretty low, but he's proven that he can get outs, and he's not a soft tosser by any means.
Yeah, this is not an ADP discussion, but I think, I would not pay to get him. And we're having serious conversations, considering him and one of our drafts, and I'm more that we did make that decision. And I think the argument I've heard for him as people who want to push him up is that he has a chance to get 200 innings, and yes, the per inning, stats are not great, but when you achieve that kind of volume, you achieve those stats through volume.
Right.
And yet, not to body shame anybody, but if you look at the guy, he's a thinner guy, and he has had durability problems. And it's nothing arm related, but he's had twisted ankles, he's had leg injuries that have kept him off the field. When I look at him, I don't see a guy whose frame can necessarily hold up for that 200 innings. So as you pointed out in your analysis, he's 165 innings has been consistently where he's been. And that's because he's usually been on the injured list pretty consistently 1 or 2 times a year. Again, no arm issues, thank goodness. But I'm just not sure those who are calling for that volume bump. Not that. Hear about him and pushing him up.
It's interesting as you look at SP2 as a whole. there are pitchers that I have rated as SP2, but I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable them being my SP2 on my team.
Yeah.
And
Right.
Fried is one of those where he's, kind of middle top of SP2, and that's where I see him when I rank him versus other pitchers. But if he's my second pitcher, I'm not comfortable with my pitching staff, regardless of size of league. It could be 12 teams, it could be 16 team leagues. I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Taylor Rogers is next for me. His ADP is 83 versus
You mean Trevor?
or Trevor Rogers. Sorry, yes, I confused those
I
two.
just want to make sure. Yeah.
Yes, 100%. Through 133 innings for the Marlins last year. He was the 13th pick in the draft in 2017. Big left-handed pitcher, throws mid-90s, changeup and slider as well. His fastball was the 11th rated fastball in baseball last year. And then he had the 16th rated changeup in baseball last year. So both of those pitches proved to be plus. And then his third pitch, his slider, had a 0 run value. So it was an average pitch and a bit of a show me pitch, but still decently effective. He averaged 10 and a half strikeouts per 9. He had a K minus BB of 20.2, which is above that 20 threshold. And he looks to be a horse. He looks to be a pitcher who we can rely upon moving forward. He's only 24 years old. He had thrown 141.1 innings last year between single A and the majors. So they gave him this incredible promotion, incredible jump. And they obviously knew that he was going to be able to perform. I love the context of the park and the NL East. I don't know that he'll accumulate a ton of wins with that offense in Miami, but he looks to be a very effective pitcher moving forward. Probably a boring SP2, a boring high SP2 without that superstar potential, but one that is not going to hurt your team. And for whatever reason, I think he's someone who we're going to be able to rely upon moving forward, even though he's only thrown 133 innings. He doesn't seem to be, when you watch his delivery, he doesn't seem to be maxing out. He's a bigger guy. His BABIP, left on base and ground ball last year were all right around league average, which I like. It means that there are no outliers that were helping him succeed last year.
Yeah.
What do you think about Taylor Rogers?
Trevor.
Oh my goodness, I did it again. Better than calling him Aaron. Go ahead.
There you go. No, I like him. He was someone that I had lower on my list because of the G context, and I kept pushing him up, comparing him against his peers. You mentioned his run value on his 2 pitches, and then the slider, which is neutral.
Mm-hmm.
But he uses those, all of those at least 14%. So he has a legitimate 3-pitch mix. And guys just don't see him well. And if you look at his Savant page, in terms of xwOBA and barrel rate and those kinds of extra base hit metrics, that bears that out. Guys just can't square him up. Pardon me. And yeah, the team context is rough. As Sandy Alcantara truther, and his 8 wins last year, I can attest to the fantasy toll that takes. Mm-hmm. However, his 15% swing strike rate, and as you said, you watch him pitch, he has that extension. Guys just don't see him well. You see him staying on the mound more. They were very careful with his innings last year. Usually pull him right at 5 innings, no matter how well he was doing. And so, hopefully we'll see his innings grow a little bit and maybe even develop a 4th pitch as he continues to develop it. I think starting with those 2 pitches, starting with the 4-seamer, he's kind of under the radar, not very hyped very much. I have him right between Shane McClanahan and Alek Manoah. I have him above Manoah and right behind McClanahan. So, but I think of those 3, he's the one you hear about the least. And I don't think, and skill-wise, that shouldn't be the case.
This maybe, how do I say this? I like that he throws fastball changeup, and that's his base. So 85% of the time he throws a fastball or a changeup. And so in theory, you can teach a pitcher with a good arm how to throw a slider or a curveball, right, to complement those two. But when you can start with the base of fastball changeup, it's a really, really good place to come from. And if they can't see him and he's got a really smooth, beautiful motion, then it's easy to dream on Rogers a little bit and think that if he does add a plus third pitch that he can take another step. Even where he is right now, if he was to throw 160 innings with the same results, he's a pretty good SP2. And I think if he's an SP2 and you couple him with an ace, and he's championship material as an SP2 in our leagues.
Yeah,
I like him a lot. He's one of those pitchers that I didn't watch a lot because I'm not a Marlins fan. I don't watch those games very often, but he's one that I will target when I'm putting together the games that I want to watch this season because of the numbers that I saw.
Yeah.
The next pitcher is probably the most volatile pitcher I've seen as far as what we might expect from him next year, and that's Dylan Cease. He's 26 years old. He was traded in that infamous trade between the Cubs and the White Sox in 2017. The Cubs traded Dylan Cease and Eloy Jimenez for Jose Quintana. Cease has 4 pitches with a 40+% whiff, or three pitches with a 40+% whiff percentage. His fastball is 96.7. He struck out 12.3 batters per 9 last year, which was a 31.9% K rate. Even with an almost 10% walk rate, he still had 22.3% K minus, or 22.3 K minus BB. Swinging strike rate of almost 15%. So the skills are there, right? The stuff is phenomenal. The question is he going to be able to take the next step and put it together to bring his walk rate down a little bit and his ERA down a little bit? He still had 226 strikeouts last year, even being as wild as he is. We took him in both NFBC and TGFBI. I've done everything I could to pry him away in our home league. If he's able to tweak slightly, which, you know, it's a coin flip as to whether he's able to do that. He's very much an SP1. He's right in the middle of that SP1 conversation. He has stuff like Scherzer, right? He's that good from a talent standpoint. The one little nervousness that I have, bit of nervousness I have with Cease is that he does pitch at Guaranteed Rate Field, which surrendered a 124 home run park factor over the last 3 years, and he's a fly ball pitcher. So he will surrender home runs, but he pitches in the AL Central. He's got a good offense and he strikes out a ton of guys. So he is smack in the middle of my SP2. He's obviously carries more risk than Rogers does, but is worth having in this area. After having selected him in TGFBI and NFBC, how do you feel about Dylan Cease?
I'm completely bought in. I mean, he was the last pitcher in my first set that we did last episode. So I had him, you know, up there, and I felt like he's worthy of that SP1 status, and you can balance out the risk of your draft moving forward to mitigate his potential, you know, ratios risk or whip risk that could be managed. But you're starting out your pitching staff with a baseline of strikeouts. And I think it's just pretty close to being unequaled. You know, having 4 pitches that have that kind of whiff rate, that kind of arsenal, and that kind of depth is just not something that you see in this tier.
He's must-see TV. If you're a pitching fanatic or you like watching incredible stuff, Dylan Cease is one to watch all year long. And if I was to pick one pitcher from this SP2 group that would had the potential to be in that top tier with Woodruff and Burns and those guys in the top 6 in SP1, Cease is the one because of his stuff. My next grouping, I have 2 pitchers. It's my old man group. It's the geriatrics portion of SP2, and that's you, Darvish, and Justin Verlander. I don't have a ton of info on Verlander in that he didn't pitch, or he didn't pitch much last year. But when you look at his previous couple of years, you realize that, you know, if he comes close to that, he's an SP1 and not an SP2. I don't want to gamble on that given his health, but he's in a comfortable context in Houston. He's been there before. 3.38 was his highest ERA since 2015, and he's won no fewer games than 15 since 2016. He's also struck out no fewer than 219 batters since 2016, including 300 in 2019. So his only question is health. If he's healthy, he's an SP1. His current Fantrax ADP is 104. If you believe he's healthy, you should be taking him 50 picks higher. Not my favorite pitcher, as I said, only in that he's an Astro. And so he's one of the few Astros that I would consider rostering at the right price. It'll be fascinating to watch him and his health and see if he can't continue to be the Justin Verlander of old. Quick question for you. Do you have any thoughts on why he cratered so badly a couple years ago before kind of recovering and coming back to life? Because he was kind of on the downside. They thought he was finished or washed in the mid-teens, and then he came back to be a Cy Young Award winner.
My recollection, and I would want to go back and put a little bit more thought in research into this, but recollection of two things. One is I think he had a pretty major injury. I want to say it was like an oblique or side or something like that during that stretch. I think he also kind of revamped his pitch mix, and he had to learn to pitch at a lower velocity and kind of refine his arsenal, because he did lose some velocity off the fastball from what he was in his glory days with the Tigers. So just off the cuff, that's what I remember, but I'd want to go back and look closer. That's what I remember.
And where would you value him?
I had him in my 21st pitcher, so he was in the top of my next cluster after my top four. So I'm pretty close to where you are, valuing track record, and we're in that range where there are question marks with innings and question marks with health. And you know, once we are in that range, to me, he's with his track record and team context. That's where I have him. And so not too much higher than you, but in that same area.
And if I remember correctly, you had Darvish in the last week's episode. Is that right?
I did. Yes. Yeah. I had it right next to Morton. I see those guys very similarly. You has more of a deeper arsenal than Morton does, but similar type swing and miss and track record of throwing innings. And you know, his big problem is home runs, and when his command wavers, he can give up home runs, but that tends to be variable from year to year. So last year was a down year. So with his arsenal and his team context, I would expect him to bounce back more to his talent. I just think he's one of the more undervalued pitchers right now. A little bit of ageism, a little bit of just overreaction to last year's service stats. If you look below the hood, the skills are still there. From when that he was coming off a year where he was a top 5 pitcher. And if you look at his skills, he's really no different. It's just the way he's being perceived in the market is a lot different.
What makes me nuts about Darvish is he threw his cutter 34% of the time last year and surrendered a 340 batting average with the cutter. So it was a +2 run value. It was the 108th rated cutter in baseball. Its expected batting average was 282. So obviously he had some bad luck with the cutter, and they slugged 624 against his cutter last year as well. So a third of the time, a little more than a third of the time, he threw a pitch that was getting tattooed everywhere. And so at what point in time do pitchers or their organizations tell them, hey, throw the fastball, batters are hitting 153 off the fastball, throw the slider, batters are hitting 180 off the slider, and let's figure out one other show pitch for you to throw. Stop throwing the cutter, right? And I guess it's easy to play armchair quarterback and, look at it after the fact and say he shouldn't have been throwing the cutter as much as he did. But I can't rank him in SP1 if he threw a pitch a third of the time that was surrendering a 340 batting average. I don't know if it's organizational context or if it's Darvish being insistent on throwing that pitch, but it had horrible results. And then his fastball is 180 batting average, 327 slug, -9 run value, or excuse me, a slider. That's a slider. His fastball, 153 batting average and a neutral run value of 0. And then his curveball, which he threw 8.2% of the time, had a -4 run value. So even if he just went, and you can't assume that increased usage will maintain that run value, because there's something to be said for showing a pitch and having hitters think about other pitches. But even if he just went fastball, curveball, slider, and he got rid of the sinker and he got rid of the cutter and he got rid of the split, I think he would be a much more effective pitcher. But if we're expecting a pitcher to see these numbers and change their pitch mix, I can't rank them too much higher than what their stats actually read. So Darvish for me is a 160 inning pitcher with 200 strikeouts, which is great with a little bit of upside, but I can't put him in that same SP1 range. He is currently at 88. His Fantrax ADP is 88, and I think that's a very good deal for you, Darvish, right now. Also one of my favorite pitchers to watch. I think just a really, really fun pitcher to watch. My next group is kind of the predictable bottom half of SP2. It's Shane McClanahan, Alek Manoah, Frankie Montas, and Luis Castillo. There aren't similarities in those pitchers necessarily, but those are all pitchers that I feel like belong in SP2. Why don't you start with McClanahan and share with us some of what you found, since I know he's
Sure.
a SP2 for you as well.
Yeah, so I have that right in that range. So my second, so I ended up Ohtani at 20, and then we talked about Verlander at 21 and Kershaw at 22. You had Kershaw in tier 1? I don't remember.
I did not.
You did not? Okay. We just talked about him maybe, I don't know. I know we talked about
5 years ago I did.
I thought we talked about him and you were talking about per innings, like how elite he is when you look at his stats. So I can't remember the context of the conversation. But again, when you're down this area where innings are a question mark, what he's going to give you on a per inning basis, once those question marks are on the board, I move him way up. Then I had Giolito at 23, Bieber at 24, and then Ray at 20. So my next set to catch up with you. So my next 4 are Ray, McClanahan, Rogers, who we talked about, and Manoah. So McClanahan's kind of tough for me because he has premium velocity. His, from the left side, his stuff rating is 106.7, which is not elite, but it's kind of that second tier. He threw 123 innings last year. So you can see an increase, maybe expected, maybe 30 to 40 innings at the most. We know the Rays manage their innings and their pitchers very closely. But he posted a 16.1% swinging strike rate. And despite having 3 pitches with negative run value, his four-seam fastball got hit really hard. And if you look at his heat map on Savant and you look at his four-seam, it's just all red, all through the zone. And so that gives me a little bit of pause. However, despite that, he still posted a negative run value with the pitch. So, and his command was above league average. So, to me, I kind of push and pull with him. Honestly, I'm really torn of how I see him. But ultimately, again, 3+ pitches and that kind of swinging strike rate in a good ballpark on a team with a good bullpen. We're in that question mark range. He definitely has some. How do you see him?
McClanahan is, I wish he didn't have so much helium, I think he's a pitcher that I would love to roster, but he's going so high in redrafts right now that it makes him hard for me to roster. He's got 3+ pitches. His fastball is impressive. He throws left side 96.4 miles an hour, 6.7 feet of extension, which is pretty good. You know, it's interesting because he wasn't the most ballyhooed prospect coming up. And I think that he took some people by surprise when he came up. I don't think he was rostered in our league until the week before he was promoted. But yeah, he's great. 14.8% swinging strike is phenomenal. He pitches on a team that understands pitching. He's got a great defense behind him. He pitches in a really great home park. He's got all the makings of an SP1 down the road. I think if he can continue to build up his stamina and looks more like a 6 or 7 inning pitcher moving forward, we're looking at an SP1. He did have ran a pretty high BABIP last year, 328, and he still had a mid-3 ERA. He's a ground ball pitcher, so we can expect his BABIP to stay a little bit high, but he's a phenomenal kind of SP2 right now. Again, from when constructing a pitching staff, I'm not comfortable with McClanahan as my number 2. If he's my number 3, I'm a little more comfortable with that, but he's a great building block and a really fun pitcher to watch. I wish he was a Mariner. He's one of those.
Are you at all concerned about his four seam and how hard it got hit? I mean, if you look, did you look at his heat map?
Yes.
On that four seam?
Yes. I also see a 308 average and a 500 slug against his four seam last year. And the XBA actually was 322. So it was higher than his actual.
It's getting hit really hard. And that's what gives me pause. I mean, yes, it's a great fastball, but why is it getting hit so hard? I mean, they must be seeing it well.
Now, if you wanted to make a counter argument, you know, we talked about Musgrove as a borderline SP1, and Musgrove throws a phenomenal slider and a phenomenal curveball, just like McClanahan does, and a fastball that doesn't get hit quite as hard as McClanahan's fastball, but is not a plus pitch as of right now. And so, because McClanahan is 24, and because he pitches for the Rays, I have confidence that they'll figure out a way to tweak his fastball enough so that it's not going to get hit so hard. I don't think it'll ever be plus pitch, but I could see them turning the fastball over, right? Or fixing the grip a little bit to have it get a little bit more rise. Interestingly, it's a fastball that moves east to west and not north south.
Exactly. Yeah. I saw the same thing. I mean, that east to west movement doesn't really keep it off the barrel.
It doesn't. Well, and it makes it much more similar to his slider, right? So if you're throwing a slider and a curveball, and those are your 2 most effective pitches, and your fastball isn't creating any kind of eye movement vertically, then you can kind of look for everything to be moving from side to side. So yeah, I think there's a little bit of reason to be concerned. He's interesting. I never think of flame throwing left-handers as being ground ball pitchers, but that is what he is. There's a little bit more caution on my end than I think industry currently with him. And yeah, so I'd love to have him on my team, and I think there's room for growth, but I'm not picking him at pick 95, and he's not going to be my SP2. That's for sure.
I kept flipping him in Rogers because when his CRA last year was 3.8 and Rogers was 3.59. I mean, their swinging strike rates edge of McClanahan, walk rate edge to McClanahan. But again, I look at just the experience of watching them pitch. I just don't feel like I see Rogers the way they do McClanahan.
Well, McClanahan.
But then the team context, I mean, it's the Rays compared to the Marlins. I mean, one's going to win 70 games, one might push 95 wins. So I don't know.
Also, but you see Marlins pitcher, or you see Rays pitchers going 4 innings sometimes, right? Or 5 1/3, and being taken out before they're showing signs of fatigue. Whereas the Marlins I see as more traditional, and they could leave Rogers in for 7 innings because that's what you do, quote unquote, with starting pitching. And he could pick up a win because he stayed in the game longer. So I think there's 2 different sides to that context. But you're right. You look at Rogers, smooth delivery, looks like he can repeat it over and over and over again. Great results, huge park, reliable, 6'5". You look at McClanahan and he's throwing harder.
Yeah, he's a smaller guy.
And it I think just from an aesthetic standpoint, it gives you pause.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's real or not, but I would rather hitch my wagon to Rogers than McClanahan at this point. Who was the next pitcher?
Yeah. Last pitcher in this grouping for me was Manoah.
And we covered him a bit in the trade.
Yeah.
Is there any regret in trading him in that you were the first to roster him in our league?
Well, in fairness, I was not. I traded actually I got him for Brandon last year in the Dylan Carlson trade. So, yeah, I acquired him last year from Brandon. Brandon is the one who had him last year, and I really wanted to get him, and I got him. Had to go up Carlson, and I got him, and then traded him back to Brandon, as we just talked about. So, to me, he's just not a finished product yet.
Right.
He has his CR last year was almost 3.9. His swing strike rate was 14.3%, but he pitched 111 innings. So he might have worn out. It was the most he'd thrown in quite some time. So he's projected for 150 innings this year. I worry a little bit about the command. He really doesn't have a reliable 3rd or 4th pitch, but he has an elite pitch to build on, and I think that that is a great place to start. But I like his ceiling. I would be comfortable with him, honestly, more as my SP3. But I think he has a little bit more ceiling this year than a lot of other guys below him. So to me, that's worth, depending on my build, what I'm doing. I want to dream on that. But yeah, he's fun to watch. His slider is amazing, and he's a really good. He's got a competitor on the mound, and he's a bigger guy, and I could see him becoming a workhorse in the future once he gets built up and matures.
We said exactly, or pretty much the same thing. In my notes, the last sentence says, I'm more comfortable with him as a great SP3 than I am an SP2 at this point. I do think he has a decent 3rd pitch. His fastball, slider are well documented, but his sinker was an effective pitch as well last year. Hit a -5 run value on the sinker, and batters hit 211 on it. He is fun. I keep going back to that home park context though. His X slug was 321 last year, which put him in the 90th percentile for pitchers. So he was not surrendering hard contact much at all, or if he was, it was getting caught. And so there's signs of him being an elite pitcher. But I'm not willing to invest the future of my team in an elite pitcher in a ballpark like that, especially on turf. He could blow up and have a 4.5 ERA next year, and it could not be his fault, right? Because he's pitching in Toronto and he's playing against New York and Boston and Tampa Bay every day. So I like him, and his skills say SP2, or at least SP2 potential, but he's, again, another pitcher that I'm not willing to invest the 79th pick in at this point in time.
Yeah. Seriously, so I'm looking at projected innings here for McClanahan, Rogers, and Manoah. All young guys that we would love to roster, especially in Dynasty. Projected innings, 147, 157, and 150. And I scroll up to Kershaw, who you teased me about having at 22. Projected innings of 133, but with a 17% strike rate, only a 4% rate, and a CR last year of 3.1. It's like, what number of innings would you rather have at what ratios? You know what I mean?
Sure.
And he plays on a juggernaut of a team.
Sure.
So I don't know. I just there's that in Dynasty, like we dream on these young guys, but if you're trying to win, why not take Clayton Kershaw? So, especially if you're not getting, again, looking at innings, right? So anyway.
But it's assuming that projections are correct. And I think the difficult part is Kershaw could throw 40 innings as, it's as likely that he throws 40 innings as it is that he throws 150. And I think that's what we have to take into account versus a 24-year-old Alek Manoah who is 6'6", 260, and we just kind of see as a workhorse.
All right. Well, let's talk about let's dive into that a little bit. So last year, McClanahan 123 innings. He's projected for 147. Do you think the Rays let him throw more than that?
More than 147?
So an increase, that would be an increase of 24 innings.
I don't know what the Rays are going to do. I would assume the answer is the realistic answer is no.
I agree with you. I don't think so. Okay, let's see Rogers. Last year they let him throw 133, forecasted for 157. Do you think they'll let him throw more than that?
Yeah, I could see that happening for sure.
Okay. And then lastly, Manoah, he threw 111, and then we have him projected at 150. So that's a 40 inning increase. Do we see them letting him do more than that?
I do, especially if they're in contention. If they're in contention and he is truly a number 2 starter for the Blue Jays, absolutely I do. I don't think they're shutting Manoah down, in the last month of the season because he's reached his innings limit.
We're in agreement on McClanahan. I agree with you on Rogers. I disagree with you on Manoah. I don't let him throw more innings year over year with the science of how much they're invested in him in the future, how young he is. I don't think they would let him throw more than that, but we'll see. Hopefully he's healthy and we get to see.
What I think we might see is Manoah going 5 innings mid-season over and over again, and not expecting him to go 7, and he only goes 5 so that they can save some of those innings for the end of the year.
For sure.
Which is not a bad place to be. But I also, getting back to pitcher build, I do think Manoah has the build to become a workhorse. And we've seen it time and again. The only team I can remember that didn't do this were the Nationals, where you have a young pitcher and that young pitcher is dominating, and you had an innings limit for him in that year, but you're also in playoff contention, and you just decide you're going to continue to run that pitcher out there because you want to win. The Nationals notoriously shut Strasburg down in contention because he had reached that innings limit, but Strasburg was also a known injury potential candidate. So I think it's context matters in this. I get the point with Kershaw, and I like Kershaw a lot, and under the hood, Kershaw is phenomenal, but I still want the innings, right? If Kershaw is my number 4 and I have 3 innings eaters in front of him, then sure, he's hugely valuable, but I'm not relying on Clayton Kershaw to throw even 120 innings next year. So the next 2 pitchers on my list were Frankie Montas and Luis Castillo. I don't love either of the two. Montas deserves to be here based on his results last year. He threw 187 innings, 207 strikeouts, 3.37 ERA, had a K-minus BB of 19.3, 1.18 whip. His splitter was the number 4 splitter in all of baseball last year with a negative 10 run value. Batters hit 126 against his splitter and slugged 168 and had a whiff percentage of 51.4. Obviously phenomenal pitch. He threw it 22% of the time. His fastball was above average. His sinker was above average. Also pitching in Oakland with a really good defense behind him in the best pitcher's park in baseball. And he is in every trade rumor to West Coast right now. And given the fact that Oakland has traded away most of their stars already, one would assume that Montas is next. He has 2 more years he has 2 years of team control left. He's a free agent in 2024. He'll be 31 years old at that point in time. So he does have tremendous value in terms of his contract and controllability. I like him a lot. I think he's a pretty decent lock to throw between 180 and 200 innings and have, 190 to 220 strikeouts. Home park will matter as far as where he's traded. I don't know why I have him this low. I think he could.
I have an answer.
You go ahead.
So I was struggling with Montas as well, because when I look at his skills, I think, why don't I like this guy more?
It's exactly.
Exactly. So I'm gonna read. I'm gonna read you some numbers. So this is an X. These are XERAs for Montas: 2.76, 6.87, 5.19, down to 3.43, back up to 4.64. Last year 3.9. So he's really mercurial, and I wonder if it comes back to the splitter. So one of the criticisms of people that rely on a splitter, and one of the things that makes Gosman kind of a unicorn, is typically the splitter comes and goes. And pitchers who rely on it as a key part of their arsenal, therefore, are volatile. And I'm wondering if, because of that, it's such a key part of his arsenal, maybe that's part of the volatility that we see with him, and maybe that's why his fantasy owners who follow him year to year, we have this uneasy feeling about him, because he does kind of go up and down. Because I echo what you said when I look at him from a skills perspective. He threw last year, how many innings this year? I write for me.
187.
187 last year. So he's shown he can handle the workload. His stuff plus was 105.6, which is very respectable for this range. And his location club is 103. So he's got well above league average command. 14.9% swing strike rate, not elite. But I look at the guys in this sort of grouping that was better than Lynn, better than Manoah, better than Blake Snell, way better than Max Fried, better than Jose Barrios. So he's getting swinging strikes. He's got 4 pitches that uses at least 19% of the time. So he has a legitimate pitch mix. So yeah, I mean, I have him as my number 30 starter, projected for 178 innings. And from a stuff perspective, he probably should be a little higher. But yeah, there is a little bit of volatility in his profile. And I think that's my argument for keeping him down here. But yeah, really interesting pitcher.
His slider can go away as far as I'm concerned. He threw it 19.4% of the time, and he gave up a 274 batting average and a 427 slug. It was the only pitch that he threw consistently that had a positive run value. This isn't really a good stat to read, but I'll read it anyways. It was the number 446th rated slider in baseball based on run value. It's just not, it wasn't a good pitch for him. It looks like a pitch that he could scrap. I think he throws it because it gives him a horizontal pitch to move pitchers' eyes, because his 3 best pitches are sinker, fastball, and split, and none of them have above average horizontal league or movement versus league average. So it's a show me pitch for sure. And again, it's a pitch that probably contributes to the effectiveness of the other 3, but he's got to figure out a better pitch to do that with. The other thing is he's not going to ever go to a park, if he's traded, that's going to be better than Oakland. So you've got to give his stats a little bit of a tick down because of park context. He might pick up a couple of wins, but he might see his stats across the board decrease a little bit. I know he's good. 200 strikeouts is great. He's not a pitcher that I'm interested in this SP2 range or at his current ADP of 76. The last pitcher in this cluster for me is Luis Castillo. I enjoyed looking at him because he's long been rumored a target of the Mariners. And he's another pitcher. He's a pitcher that makes me wonder about the Reds organization and their ability to teach pitching and understand what to look for. He's got a dynamite arm. He's currently going 61.73 according to Fantrax ADP. And I feel like he's succeeding despite the Reds organization and despite their decision-making with regards to pitch mix. He threw his changeup more than any other pitch. It was 30.3% of the time. Batters hit 209 against the changeup with a 312 slug and a -2 run value, and it was the 73rd best changeup in baseball. His fastball, he threw 28.5% of the time, 97 miles an hour, 257 batting average, 478 slug, and had a +4 run value. So his fastball was not an effective pitch for him. His sinker, which was right around the same velocity, 23.8% of the time. Batters last year hit 344 against his sinker with a 505 slug. And his X stats were not that much better. At a not +9 run value and was the 7th worst sinker in baseball. So think about that. He threw a pitch 24% of the time where batters hit 344. It's the same argument as Yu Darvish. And I think he's throwing the sinker because in theory, you don't want to give up fly balls in Cincinnati because the park is so small. So they teach Castillo to throw a sinker so he doesn't surrender home runs, but it doesn't matter if they're hitting 344 against the pitch, right? And then his slider had a -5 run value and they hit 170 against the slider and he threw that 17.4% of the time. So he's got a great arm. He's throwing 97 miles an hour. He has as we see, he's got a great changeup. It looks filthy on TV. Start with fastball slider, or excuse me, fastball changeup, slider, and then figure out if you even need a 4th pitch. I think it's malpractice almost that they're having him throw the sinker as much as they do. Even if it looks great as a 97-mile-an-hour sinker, it's just not effective. So that's my rant on Luis Castillo. I think that if the Mariners did trade for him, you'd see a huge uptick. The Mariners are smart as far as pitch mix and getting the most out of their pitchers. It's a bigger park. I like him a lot as a pitcher. I really, really do. I just think they're really misusing him in Cincinnati. What did you find in looking at Luis Castillo? And would you pick him at pick 61?
No, I would not. Honestly, he makes my heart hurt because I like him so much. But he was in my just missed. He did not make my top 32. He's a pitcher, has ground ball lean. He's almost like a pitcher from a different era. The fact that he's changed up first, this is not something we do see in today's game, but it is such a great pitch. And he has the velocity on the fastball, as you said, to have that be his core. But I just, from a redraft perspective, I would rely on him in that park, on that team. He is a ground ball leaning pitcher. They have a poor infield defense. Last year his CRO was 4. His K rate was 23%. His swing strike was 14%. All those things are fine, but none of them scream that he's about to break out. And I think we're at the point where you just kind of, on that team, we have to accept what he is. He's a whip risk. He's going to have games where he strikes out 12. And he's going to be a little bit up and down, and he's going to underperform the talent that we all see. And again, it makes me sad because I like him so much. I want to see him excel.
How much of a bump do you give him if he's traded to even an average organization?
If it's a pitching organization like Cleveland or Seattle or someplace like that, where I felt like they could help refine his arsenal, I would bump him up quite a bit. As I don't doubt the talent, the makeup, I don't doubt the want to at all. He's just kind of he's just underperforming his talent in that situation. So I would bump him. To answer your question directly, I would bump him up quite a bit.
Kind of the top of the SP2 range.
He's got the talent to be there.
And if you're the Mariners, would you trade Noelvi Marte for Luis Castillo at this point in time?
I would not, because I don't think they need another pitcher that badly to give up on Marte.
Okay. I'd consider it. Just a quick Mariners tangent. I think Marte is the heir apparent at third base. His body's going to get too big to play third or to play short. And I think Castillo, if you slotted him in with Ray, move Gonzalez to the 4th spot, Gonzalez to the 3rd spot, Flexen in the 4th spot. You're looking at a really different rotation with him there, and I think he would thrive in a park like Seattle with that kind of defense and the pitching philosophy that the Mariners have. I feel I'm like you. I'm close to shedding tears about the lost potential of Luis Castillo, because you look at his pitches and they look phenomenal. You watch him on TV and he looks like he should be an ace, and really he's just kind of a middling 3rd starter at this point in time. Again, you look at the numbers on the sinker, and he should not be throwing that pitch anymore. So pour a little out for Luis Castillo right now. And then my last 3 are Blake Snell, Chris Bassett, and Jose Barrios. I'm not a fan of, I guess, sort of a fan of Bassett. Barrios and Snell, I don't love. We're starting to get into that portion of starting pitching where you'll have your favorites and you'll have pitchers that you feel like you need to rank in these areas based on their numbers, but you are not going to be the manager that rosters them. Snell I have at 105, or is Fantrax ADP is 105.82, 29 years old. Pitches for the Padres, obviously. Had 2+ pitches in his fastball and slider. Pretty well documented that those 2 pitches are really great. They led him to the Cy Young Award in Tampa Bay a couple years ago. And also well documented that he tried to mix in a slider, a changeup, which is a horrible pitch for him. He threw it 10% of the time and surrendered a 429 batting average on the changeup last year and a 595 slug. When he scrapped that changeup in the second half of last season, he started to pitch a lot better. He had a 3.24 ERA in the second half and a 598 OPS, and his ERA in August was 1.72. So a pick of Blake Snell is a gamble that he figured his pitch mix out in the second half, and he's going to continue to achieve at that level. How comfortable are you in slotting Blake Snell in as a low-end SP2 in fantasy?
I tried my earnest to get him in my top 32. He ended up in my just missed. I kept moving him down simply because of the command. I look at his K rate, it's almost 31% last year. I want those Ks. And then I look at his walk rate and it's 12.5. And his CR was over 4. Yes, he finished well. I don't trust him. Again, I want it because of the way he finished and because of the swing and miss, because of his pitch mix and his velocity. I wanted to rank him higher. I wanted to believe. But ultimately, I don't trust him not to tinker his way back into being middling again. And I just don't want to rely on people that I don't want to rely on pitchers that he has a documented track record of command problems and commanding his pitches. So I don't want to invite that kind of whip risk and ratio risk on my team at an SP2 level. I do like, again, 31% K rate. That's really good. He can get swing and miss. But he has I'm looking at the command scores. He's the lowest on my list here. It's not that close either. So
what do we think about? So 2 questions for you. Do we think a starting pitcher can survive and thrive with 2 pitches? Because his fastball and slider are really, really good pitches. And when you look at the Padres organization, are they less of a forward-thinking organization and not as good with pitchers as maybe their reputation says? Because I look at Snell and I look at Gore and I look at Darvish, and we talked about Darvish's cutter and how it was a shit pitch essentially. They've done some good things with Musgrove, but I wonder if they're still trying to figure out what they want to do with their pitchers as well. We look at Lamet, Morejón, some of the other guys, Patino, who they traded. They have tremendous talent. I don't know that it's an ability to, or lack of ability to evaluate talent and find talent as much as it is how they tweak. I don't know that I trust their organization very much at this point.
I don't know that they've earned your trust at this point. I agree with you on that. They're not an organization to me like where if someone goes there, you give them a bump. I mean, I don't know if I'm at the point where I would mark them down, but I also wouldn't necessarily say, oh, they're going to help push him towards his best version of himself. They're going to help him close the gap or take that next step. I don't think they've necessarily earned that at this point.
Right. Snell is, the counter for Blake Snell though is, and why I have him in SP2 is that he has fastball, curveball, slider are his 3 best pitches, not in that order. He had a 46.4% whiff rate on the slider and a 47.4% whiff rate on the curveball. And despite that whiff rate with the curveball, he had a +2 run value with it. But that says 3+ pitches, essentially.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of tweaking the pitch mix and running out and tackling him and bringing in a reliever if he ever throws the changeup again. But he's got really good extension on the fastballs and -10 run value last season. He does give up some home runs, pretty high slug on the fastball, but he can build off of that, right? And I think maybe I'm wish casting a little bit with Blake Snell. I want to see him succeed. He's from Seattle. He's got a little bit of that, affected swag to him, if you want to call it that.
He looks like a skateboarder.
Yeah.
And you're making me laugh because I started picturing Bob Melvin tackling him on the mound. Now I can't stop laughing.
Right. But it's true. Look at the change. Look at the changeup. Look at the.
And here's the thing: when I said about tinkering his way back to mediocrity, you know what his favorite pitch is?
By the changeup. Yeah.
He's documented. It said like, "Oh, my changeup is my best pitch." No, it's not. No, it's not, dude.
That's when you step in and you say, "We're paying you $50 million over 5 years. You're going to throw the pitches that we tell you to throw. The numbers say this is what you need to throw."
No, I love your pushback, and I love what you shared because I wanted to have him in this range. And it was just the rigor that I kept pushing him down. I don't think it's a bad rank. I don't at all. I value swing and miss very much, and I wanted to push him up.
SP2 is literally should be called the pitching range where if your pitching coach and your organization helps you throw the right pitches, you'll be great. And if they don't, you're going to be an SP3 or 4. I feel like that's every.
Or you can call it the fairy dust tier, where if it's fairy dust is sprinkled like 30 more innings on you.
Totally. Then you'll be great.
Can I just get 30 more innings of like security on this 140?
Right. Then you'll be worth it. Chris Bassett was next. His ADP currently is 126. 33 years old, was traded for JT Ginn and another pitcher from the A's to the Mets. He'll be a free agent in 2023, so they'll get 1 year from him. He's a throwback. As you dig deeper, he is 100% a throwback. I know we talked about him a little bit last week. Throws 6 pitches, which is pretty wild.
That's awesome. And
and all 6 pitches have a negative run value, which is great.
That's amazing. Yeah.
His stuff isn't phenomenal. His average fastball was 93.2 miles an hour. Throws a sinker more than any other pitch, 36% of the time. Sinker, fastball, cutter, change, slider, curveball. But he had 3 pitches where batters hit less than 185. His fastball, his slider, and his curve. And so what that says to me, if you look at pitch mix and effectiveness of each pitch, is that he has very good command. He has a very good idea of what he's doing out there. These numbers are coming from Oakland, and so we have to take that with a grain of salt, as we said with Montas. And he has a lower swinging strike rate at 10.1%, which is a little bit nerve-wracking for me. But 6 pitches of negative run value is really good. Citi Field is not as great of a pitcher's park as Oakland is, but is still a pitcher's park. So in 2020, he scrapped his slider for a cutter and reduced his curveball usage in half. And that is what helped lead him to a greater level of success. He throws 5 pitches more than 10% of the time. He's a pitcher that I think he's boring when you look at him from a fantasy perspective, because he's not going to really outperform what he did last year. 160 innings, 160 strikeouts. You're hoping for, probably 11 to 14 wins from him on the Mets this year. But if you can get him at pick 126, and he's essentially a low-end SP2 that slots in as a championship SP3, I think that's a really good value there. And he's one of those pitchers that doesn't have the name value. And so you're going to be able to get him right around or maybe even lower than his current ADP. You have anything to add on Bassett other than what you said last week?
I don't. I had him as my number 32 starter here. So last person in this grouping. And I think, pairing him, so like Cease and Bassett or something like that, as your first 2. If you're second, if you're looking for just security innings, just help across a balanced profile, and to balance the first pick that was more on the risk side, if you took maybe a Peralta or a Rodon or somebody like that and come back with Bassett, I think that's a great start. And then or as you said, if you can get him as your third, I think that's a steal, because when we talked about the trades last time, we delved into his pitch mix, and he's had a 3-year trend of improvement, of steady improvement in his swinging strike rate and his K rate, and that the depth of that arsenal. And I agree with you that it's, certainly no park has a park factor as good as Oakland, but Citi Field is underrated in terms of how much it helps pitchers. So I think going there is a boon for him, and he's on obviously a much better team, so he have opportunity for decisions, and he will pitch deep into games.
Right. So my pitcher 32 is, I don't know if this is controversial or not, because his current ADP is 60. His pick 60 is Jose Barrios. I don't see it.
Me, he was my number 31, so we're one pick off.
Okay, but we're definitely
We're in lockstep.
We're in lockstep, but we see it differently than the rest of the community does, at least right now. First of all, how can you pick Barrios over Gosman if you're picking through Toronto pitchers? I don't see it.
Nope.
He's a horse. He's going to give you, common theme again. He's going to give you 200, maybe 180 to 200 innings.
Yeah, probably one of the safer innings plays for sure.
Holy, same number of strikeouts probably, but he's got very little upside. His swinging strike rate last year was 9.9%. He doesn't walk a ton of batters, but he's kind of your prototypical major league number 2, and on an outstanding staff, a number 3. The move from Minnesota to Toronto didn't do him any favors as far as surrendering home runs. And then to your point a little bit earlier, any pitcher with a subpar fastball makes me nervous. His fastball is very hittable. He had a +5 run value last year. They slugged .538 against the fastball, and the X slug was .551. So, curveball was a good pitch, slider or sinker was a good pitch, but I can see a little regression from him, or a little decline, I guess is a better way to put it. He did have a K-BB of +20, and that's something that we always look at, but I think that's more because he has very good control and not necessarily a great strikeout pitcher. So Barrios is, he's an inning filler. I think he's a decent number 3 on a championship fantasy staff, but at pick 60, there's no way you'll find me picking him there. Not at all, especially not pitching for Toronto. How about you?
I echo everything you said. He's average strikeouts, good command. That helps him keep his K-BB in the more respectable range. Yeah, but I don't think, other than pitching deep enough to get your decisions on a good team, I don't think he's really a standout in any other area. And so I would invest the draft capital elsewhere, where I feel like we get more categorical impact. We don't play in a points league, so hitting innings without help across the other categories doesn't necessarily move the needle. So I would look to get someone who could help me more in other areas.
I assume that he's ranked as high as he is in part because he does maintain a pretty low whip, and he does get you innings and strikeouts. And so in that sense, those are all things you're looking for. When you're looking for SP2, SP3 is that bulk. But to me, he's walking a pretty thin line with the fastball that has a +500 slug. You're looking for trouble, and I could see him imploding. Are there any other pitchers that you wanted to cover in SP2?
No, I don't think so. My last 4 were kind of the innings guys that for me, and that was in this order: Lynn, and then Montas, and then Barrios, and then Bassett. Looking at the skills, I kept flipping Montas and Lynn. Ultimately kept Lynn above Montas. But I think if push comes to shove, I might take Frankie, depending on where he ended up, just because he has more swing and miss. But Lynn has more safety, so a lot depend kind of on your build. So yeah, that was my last 4. Again, I saw them as sort of safer innings type, and I think Montas has the most upside of that group. And honestly, Bassett's probably my favorite because he would cost the least.
So I like Lynn, obviously Lynn a lot more than you do. I had him pretty high in SP2.
Yeah, you did.
Is there something you saw in Lynn that was of concern to you?
To me, yeah, he just a 13% swing strike rate. I saw him a fair amount last year, and he just he lacked, to my eyes, he lacked the out pitch. He could get 2 strikes, and then it was just foul ball, foul ball, foul ball, foul ball, and that just ran up his pitch count, and it affected his ability to stay in the game, which is something that he's been able to do in the past. So it just gave me pause. His Sierra was 3.75. So he's pushing on towards the 4 side on his ERA. He takes pride in not doing any conditioning. I saw a quote the other day. I don't believe in conditioning. So when I see a player who's in the last third of his career, who's not necessarily putting in the work, and then again, just firsthand experience watching him, these swinging strike rates kind of mirror what I saw. He does tunnel array. I love the way you explain that and what he does with his pitches. I think within his four seam, he has like variations within it,
right?
Different like movements and things like that, and that's interesting to me. And he's certainly a competitor on the mound, but I didn't see the swinging strike rate or any sort of like ceiling that would push him up for me. He was very comparable in terms of results to his teammate Lucas Giolito.
Mm-hmm.
You looked at the number of innings, the K-SPB, the swing strike, but the difference is that Giolito brings strikeouts. His swinging strike rate is 16.3, as opposed to Lynn is down at 13. So, and the Sierras were very similar as well, 3.7. So I would rather take the guy who's going to get me some swing and miss, along with the sort of ratio contributions.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So we have similar pitchers, but they're all kind of all over the board.
Yeah. Do you want to do risers and followers, your favorites, or you want to move on?
No, riser and follower is great. My riser is Dylan Cease. We talked about him quite a bit. I believe in that whiff percentage. I believe in the stuff. I think as he gets, he'll probably fine tune his command a little bit as he gets a little bit older, more experience, but the stuff is there to be a dominant SP1. And my follower is Jose Barrios. Again, ADP of 60.56 and with very little upside. So already I think being picked too high, and no reason to believe that he'll be any better than where he's been already. So he's my follower.
Okay.
How are you?
Rodon was my riser. As we talked about, I would pay for or I would pick him over his ADP and take the reduced price because of his injury risk based on his landing spot and the skills he showed last year.
Mm-hmm.
He's well worth it. And then for my follower, I have a question. What is Shane Bieber's ADP?
Shane Bieber's current ADP is, let me go back to here in 1 second. Let's see. 25.04. When I put together notes for the SP1 podcast, he's 25.04.
Okay. Yeah, so Bieber is my follower. I have him ranked as my 24th pitcher, and this is redraft focus. This is no way a dynasty perspective, but from a redraft perspective, I'm not quite sure that we know who he is yet, and I think his draft price reflects this amount of certainty in his performance that I'm not sure that his track record warrants. If you go back 4 years ago, he came up as this command first guy. His walk rates were 4.7 and 4.7 back-to-back years in 2018, 2019. And then the shortened season, he was dominant, but his walk rate rose to 7.1%. But he was clearly dominant. And there were a couple of factors in that season, obviously. It's the fact that obviously it was a shortened schedule, limited schedule. They only played the AL and NL Central, those were obviously some of the weaker teams. But he was dominant that year. There's no denying that. And then he came back last year. He fought some health issues, but then his walk rate rose to 8.1%, and his xERA was 3.73. When I look at his pitch mix, his fastball averages 93 miles an hour, which is fine, but it's not anywhere elite velocity. And his pitch mix, he has 3 pitches primarily that he uses. So when I look at someone who's coming off shoulder issues, so if we assume health, hopefully that's behind him, his core skills are 93 mile per hour fastball and a 3-pitch mix. And his carrying tool was supposed to be his command, but we're seeing a gradual increase in his walk rate. The other narrative that was interesting to me about Bieber is when he burst on the scene, it was, well, he gives up a lot of hard contact. He's in the zone all the time. And I'm wondering if those things are related. The fact that he was in the zone all the time with those really low walk rates was leading to his, giving up a lot of hard contact. And then we saw him go out of the zone more often. So that the walk rate then goes up. So he manages the hard contact. And then we had that confirmation bias in 2020, like, oh, he's fixed it.
Right.
He's this elite pitcher, I guess. And I would press pause on that for redraft for 2022 and assume that he is that elite pitcher. He certainly has documented skills where he potentially could be. I guess I'm just questioning again, is he fully formed yet? Do we really know what he is yet? Is he really worth pick 25 off the board? I would argue that he's not. I want to take last year's stats with a grain of salt because he was hurt, or he turned out to be hurt. I don't know how long he pitched with the injury, but his ex-WOBA last year was over 400, and his end zone whip percentage was only 31%. Typically guys who have elite swing and miss, their zone whip is going to be in the upper 30s, and if they're elite, in the low 40s. And he was only at 31%. So that goes back to, is that hard contact going to continue to be part of his profile when we see him in a full season? Right. And how much of that hard contact can he consistently avoid if he's only at 93 miles an hour, and his command is going to continue to be more towards league average instead of elite? Right. So maybe with full health and a full off season, he'll be back to that elite swing and miss and elite command and make me look silly. But again, for redraft in 2022, I would fade him and not pay that price for redraft.
I think that was a very sound argument for not picking Bieber there in redraft. Obviously, I had him pretty high as an SP1, but we talk about not taking risks in those first two rounds, picking known commodities in the first few rounds and then being able to take some risks later on in the middle rounds. And Bieber, to your point, is too much of a risk health-wise and statistically because of the volatility to be taking in round two. So I have written in my notes that he's worth the ADP at that point at pick 25. I might retract that a little bit. I'd be much more comfortable with him as a round 3 selection or even a round 4 selection than that high.
He's a perfect pitcher. He's like a perfect case study of like kind of the time that we're in with baseball, because we had the pandemic shortened season, and you and I talked recently about the ripple effects of that, right? Because he had this skill change and we saw it pop in the season, and then he had this injury. So it's like this cocktail. And even looking at the projection systems, he has the highest inter-projectional system deviation. Like they don't know what to make of him because he was so great in this small sample. And then you have 2 full seasons before that where we had elite command, but we haven't seen that since then. So there's this huge variation of like, and so again, that's where I'm just would push pause from a redraft and say, okay, do we really know what we're getting yet? So
I love it. So we're going to take a quick break and we will be right back. And we're back. All right. Favorite pitcher from this group, Aaron? Who is it?
So I skipped over my favorite pitcher. It was Shohei Ohtani, who I have at my number 20 overall. I think a player like Shohei, it's funny to say he's underrated, but I do think what he does with the bat overshadows his skill on the mound. If you look at just his results for 2021, and keep in mind that he had very limited innings in 20 on the 2019. I don't think he's a finished product yet as a pitcher. And also keep in mind, he controls his velocity. He will throw velocity when he needs it. And so if you look at his velocity, it's not necessarily going to pop his fastball velocity because he doesn't throw at his full velocity all the time. But just from a stuff perspective, his stuff was 110.5. His K minus BB was 21%. His K rate was 29.3%. His walk rate for the year was 8.3. In the second half, it was only 3%. That's probably not sustainable, but I think it does show just an increased command. And I think if he can keep his command in that 6 to 7% range, which is where honestly most of the players in this grouping are, with the swinging strike rate and K rate that he has, that will obviously be a huge thing for his skills. But 156 strikeouts and 130 innings. 1.09 whip. His Sierra was 3.59, which was better than, Giolito, Ray, McClanahan, Rogers, Manoa, all these guys we talked about. So the underlying skills, underlying contact metrics support the ratios that he posted. And the guys just don't see him well. His K percentage, he's in the 85th percentile on XBA K percentage, and then in the upper 80 percentile on expected ERA, slugging, and xWOBA. So, and he's just an athlete on the mound. Again, he's not a finished product. And I do think the fact that he hits as much as he does, and he doesn't have a strict schedule around pitching, probably hurts his ceiling. He's never probably going to win a Cy Young. But I just think his skill as a pitcher gets overlooked. And I have him, I wouldn't make him my SP1. They're going to use a 6-man rotation, so you're never going to get 200 innings. That's not in play. But again, we're down here in the range where we have guys that throw 140, 150 innings who we see as value. So depending on who you're getting the first round, to me, he should be considered as an SP2 based on skill. He has a 4-pitch mix that uses 4 pitches, he uses at least 12% of the time. So he has the velocity, he has the athleticism. So I just think he gets overlooked as a pitcher, and I want to highlight him as my favorite in this tier.
Awesome. He does get overlooked, and I don't even really think of him as a pitcher, despite the fact that has #1 skill, just because he's such a dominant hitter and such a dominant athlete. I wish he was promoted more than he is. He's a once in a lifetime sort of player. And I'm glad that you highlighted him in this SP2 conversation. I don't know that I have a favorite out of this group. I'll say that the two I'm most excited to watch are Carlos Rodon and Dylan Cease. Part of it is my own investment in Rodon in our home league, and our investment in Cease in the 2 expert leagues. But they have that ceiling, that potential dominance, which is something that we always dream on. So I'll just highlight those two as the two that I'm most excited to watch. But this tier has some very exciting pitchers.
Yeah.
Even Blake Snell, who's kind of almost post-hype at this point, is really, really fun to watch. But
yeah, I appreciated the fact how you were saying like some of these pitchers you felt like pressure to rank here. Mm-hmm. I felt more that way in the first tier. Mm-hmm. But I definitely relate to that. You do have that sense of like, oh, I have to put this guy in this tier, or I felt that way more with the first tier. This tier, I felt a little bit more freedom to move guys down if I felt like, or move guys up. I enjoyed. It was more fun. I guess I don't know. I just felt more liberated to make more decisions, which is odd. Obviously, I had the same freedom with the first tier, but I felt more pressure with that tier. Right. To include certain guys and to put them in a certain order, I guess, based on the way they're thought or the way we come to think about them. Mm-hmm. It was fun.
It was fun. This may be my favorite tier, even though it wasn't the most exciting across the board. I think there's that potential. You see track record with a guy like Manoa or a guy like McClanahan of 100 innings. And this is the tier that allows you to dream on what's next. And you can't put those guys in the SP1 yet, but super fun. Open forum. Do you have a question?
I do. So this week for our league is keeper cutoff. Mm-hmm. So our roster is 30 players. That includes 5 players that have designation as a minor leaguer, which our league, I'm sure every league is a little bit different of what that entails, but for us it's 5. So we have 30 total, 5 can be in the minors. And then we have to cut down to 15. And that 15 can be players of any designation, can be in terms of position or whether they're a minor or major leaguer. So my question for you is just not to speak to your strategy or your team specifically this year, but just in general, your thoughts on like how you've approached that or what your thoughts are about that. And because I think other people might be in a similar spot and maybe be an interesting thing to talk about given what is happening for us in our league this week.
So this year, I really changed. Sorry, I'm bringing my team up right now. I really changed my perspective on who to keep and why. In previous years, I just kind of went all offense and assumed that I'd be able to put together a competitive pitching staff through the draft and then through the waiver process. And what I found was that I wasn't able to really find dominant pitchers because they were already taken and already kept. I also really devalued saves and in fact punted saves a number of years because I felt like closers were too highly valued, or what I found was I was unwilling to value them at their market rate. And so my approach this year was much more balanced. Tried to find some pitchers who I thought provided me with maybe not the same season as last year, but enough innings and strikeouts to be competitive in the counting stats. And then I could try to change the ratios and the margins with some relievers, maybe with some lower inning starters on the back end. And then I traded in the offseason for both Mark Melancon and David Bednar because I realized that saves are what I need. Top total for saves last year in our league was 106. The average total was 59.6. The median was 58. And so my target is to kind of get in between that average and that top, which would be somewhere around 85 saves or so. Obviously, Melancon and Bednar aren't going to get me there, but that's the hope. So to answer your question, I'm keeping 8 hitters and 7 pitchers, which is a much different mix than what I've done historically. Historically, it's been more like 12 hitters, 3 pitchers. And then for those who are rostering injured players, it's a big decision to make. Unfortunately, I own Fernando Tatis, Ronald Acuna, and Jack Flaherty. I've decided to cut Flaherty this year and then subsequently trade for Carlos Rodon to take his place. And this year I'm keeping fewer minor leaguers than I ever have, and proximity matters more to me now than it ever has. I believe I'm in win now mode and that I can compete for the championship. So the only minor leaguers I have are Julio Rodriguez, MJ Melendez, and George Kirby. Well, actually Hunter Green as well, so 4 total. But all 4 of those you can realistically expect to spend a portion of the season in the majors this year. So again, my approach is much more balanced this year than it has been in the past. I think as we understand statistics more and we have more at our disposal, it makes it easier for me to keep pitchers because it becomes more predictive and a little bit less of a crapshoot with more information. So that's my approach. I have a lot of power and speed, a little less speed with the injuries, but I'm going to be looking for, what I do is, I guess to explain the approach is, as I said, I take the top total for each category, the average total for that category, the median total and the bottom total. And I try to, from the previous year, and I try to project what I need to reach 80 to 85% of the top total in each category. And then I take projections for each of the players that I'm keeping. And that allows me to figure out what else I need in the draft to get to that 80 or 85th percentile. And again, what I found is I'm pretty heavy in OPS and homers and steals, but that my average has the potential to be pretty low. And so I need to supplement there. And then I have a ton of strikeouts and an okay whip, but I'm going to need to find more quality ratios moving forward. How about you with your own answer? Or I should also add that I don't have a pick until round 5, but then I finish out in round 11. So I'm not going to get real premier players in from the draft. I'm going to have to look to kind of supplement the stars that I already have.
So what I heard you say was you're looking at, where you think you stand categorically with your team.
Mm-hmm.
What I wasn't clear on is, are you then making keeper decisions based on, hey, I'm weak in this area? What I heard you sound like more that's looking forward of like, this is who I'm keeping. I'm doing that analysis and knowing going into the draft, this is what I need to address. Or did you actually make any adjustments of, hey, I'm seeing I'm standing here, whereas if I keep this player, that might move the needle in that category. So I'm trying to go into the draft with as much categorical balance as I can possibly have.
Very rarely would I take that approach.
Okay, I didn't think so based on what you said. I'm just confirming.
Definitely a top 15. The top 15 values on my team, I'm going to keep. Value meaning both performance and trade value. And I'm going to keep those players, and I'm going to rely upon my ability to create a roster around them. The only time I'm really going to think about categorical balance or position scarcity is if I believe that if I can project who's going to be kept and there's no player draftable around where I'm picking that is going to, I can plug into that place. So a good example is I traded a first round pick next year, which is round 16, for Wilson Contreras. Because, you know, as we spoke about a couple months ago in the Catcher podcast, I think Contreras has some underlying skill that says he can be even better counting stat wise than he was last year. And he's going to be the focal point of that Cubs offense this year. He'll also potentially get more plate appearances with the DH. Yep. I was willing to give up that high pick in next year's draft to have him. I don't value catcher. I believe that I could find two catchers in the middle of the end of the draft to give me decent production at that position. But Contreras gives me a tremendous amount of flexibility. And because I'm also keeping MJ Melendez, I'm no longer thinking about rostering three catchers. If I would have kept Melendez and picked my catchers at the end of the draft, I would have had three catcher eligible players on my roster, which is in my opinion, too many for as shallow of a roster as we carry. So yes, I think about position and I think about having balance categorically coming into the draft. But if it's a choice in balance versus talent, I'm taking talent every time. If that answers your question.
Yeah, it does.
How about you?
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing. I know you've worked really hard and you've excruciated over these decisions. So I appreciate you sharing.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting though is at least for me, I invest all this time in understanding the players that I roster and putting together spreadsheets and trying to understand what my projected statistics look like at a certain point in time. And then it comes to trading and trade conversations. And there are times where I feel myself being a little bit impulsive, right? Because I just like the player. And I have to go back and incorporate some of that statistical analysis. Or you feel like you have someone on the hook for a trade and you get excited about it. And there are points in time where I feel the statistical analysis get clouded a little bit because I get excited about the potential of owning or rostering that player, which is why I forced myself to not pull the trigger on the Rodon trade for 6 days because I really wanted to be comfortable with it, both analytically and emotionally before making the trade.
Yeah, well, credit to Brandon too for being patient and leaving it up for that long. I think, I mean, certainly from your side of it, I can understand what you wanted to do there and think through it. But also just credit to the other owner because I know being on the other side, like having an offer out that long can be kind of tedious, like you're waiting for an answer. You guys probably had good communication throughout that. Yeah, credit to both of you for the patience to.
Or he forgot about it, one of the two. I wouldn't put that past Brandon either. How about you from just that roster construction and keeper thought process? What did you go through in? I guess that's more of what I'm interested in because I know you well enough, and I think the listeners know you well enough to understand that you're very analytical and you take your time with process and you have guardrails and framework with which you want your players to fit. What they may not know is kind of what goes through your head during that process and the things that you know, your strengths, but also your opportunities in getting to the point where we have to submit our keepers.
Yeah, a couple of things. I think for me, what draft picks I have color my decisions as well. It's not something I heard you mention, so I want to mention that. You know, you did say that you don't have a pick till the 5th now after your Rodon trade. I also don't have a ton of early picks. I've been able to get 2 3s, 4 think I have a 5, or maybe a 6, but I have not done a good job in the past. I've been willing to trade draft capital in the past, I don't say very easily, but I've been quick to trade it when I saw an opportunity to get a player, because thinking about our draft, we're keeping 15 players. So the first round pick is not a first round talent per se. It's just the first group of what was left over. And so, but as I've gotten more tenure in the league, I really want to do a better job going forward. And I hope my 2023 picks reflect that. Of just giving myself more capital early on in the draft, because I do feel hamstrung knowing that if I don't keep this categorical or this player, most likely I'm not going to be able to address it, because I just don't have the capital in the draft to go and get it, right? So I have to go into the draft with more of a feeling better about where I am, because I'm not going to have as many chances early on to get that fix, right? Because the board is going to get depleted very quickly. And one of the things that I do is I track what positions are taken year over year to try to get a sense too of where do our competitors typically pick early on in the draft in terms of positions, and what's going to be left and pick through the most. And that kind of informs too. For an example, we talked a little bit about catcher, but catcher is something where catchers are usually in the first 4 rounds. There's 6 or 7 catchers taken. So any catchers of quality are going to be gone pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And also starting pitchers. So our league devalues starting pitchers. We see that, and I don't say that as an opinion. I think if you look at trades and also then players kept, what that would indicate to me is there's a little bit undervaluing of starting pitchers. So as a result, there's a lot of starting pitchers in the pool, and a lot of people in the first 4 or 5 rounds are addressing starting pitching. Whereas that's not an area of focus for me. So it allows me to focus in other areas. Mm-hmm. So
it's interesting you say that real quickly, because that's exactly what I saw. And that's exactly why I went after what I consider to be 3 number 1 starters. Mm-hmm. Was I felt like I could get them at a cost that was, I think I gave up a 2, a 1, and Andrew Vaughn, and then some middling picks, basically for 3 borderline number 1 starters in our league. And it was because it wasn't that I wanted number 1 starters as much as I just thought that the value was there. There's a little bit of a market inefficiency with mm-hmm. starting pitching. And I was willing to pay to go get them at that cost. But that's interesting. I didn't crunch the numbers to figure that out, but kind of that's what my instinct said. And then when we started to have negotiations, I realized that this is a pretty low cost to pay for pitching of this value. And if you don't have that kind of pitching, you're not going to win.
Yeah. A couple other factors for me are categorical and positional scarcity. So mm-hmm. you mentioned what it takes to get into the compete range on saves. And I think the number of definitive closers in the pool will be between 0 and 1. Right. I mean, it's going to be everyone in the pool is going to be a speculative committee. You're either taking someone like an Art Warren or someone like that who has potential to ascend, or you're taking a Jake McGee who may get 30% of the opportunities. Right. You know what I mean? So the number of de facto closers, again, I'm making a joke, 0 to 3 maybe. Right. That will be in the pool. So that colors my decisions about what kind of relievers am I going to carry over. And that's tough, because when you look at the value of reliever in Dynasty year over year, it's null. There's a lot of turn at the position. It's a lot of change. So from a Dynasty perspective and trying to think Dynasty value, holding a reliever doesn't make a lot of whole damn sense. But from a categorical standpoint, if you got to go, if you don't hold any over, you're going into the draft with 0, there's not a lot available. So categorical and positional scarcity, I think, play a role for me.
It's a risk that's not very much fun, but it's one that you have to take if you want to compete. It really is.
And then I think the last thing again is from a Dynasty standpoint, and this carryover is players who have age on them. Mm-hmm. So player who's 23 or 24 maybe isn't fully formed. So say This is no longer a decision I have because I traded him, but say like a Jesus Sanchez and a Justin Turner, right? So both of them are the caliber of players you could typically get in our draft. Would I want to hold the young talent who has, you know, max exit velocity and all these things I can dream on, potentially be this slugger, or do I take the known quantity who has a ceiling because of his age and because of his injury history, but who I know kind of the stats that I can expect, right? Do I take the known or do I bet on the unknown? And I think that's the other debate that I have going through this process of, do I want to hold on to guys who still have that potential of what they could be? Or do I take more certainty into the draft and more stats I know I can bank and build on? And I really wrestle with that decision going through the process.
I love that point. And I think we can look at each owner and kind of suss out what their approach is with regards to that particular question. Your trade with Brandon Turner for Sanchez was very indicative of, I think, of how the two of you approach this particular question. I found myself changing my own perspective on that pretty drastically this year. You know, I went from owning Elijah Green and Christian Hernandez and Brady House and even Max Clark to keeping Julio, who's probably going to start, who may start the year in the major leagues, MJ Melendez, who probably will start the year in the major leagues, George Kirby, who is competing for the 5th spot and pitching today, which I'm super excited about, and Hunter Green, right? These are all guys that are either AAA or on their way. And I would prefer, I don't know that I think about the known commodity versus unknown as much as I think about if it's unknown, proximity really, really matters. I'm willing to keep a bunch of unknowns if proximity plus high-end talent is present, right? But that's a shift because I couldn't have let go of Elijah Green or Christian Hernandez in years past because I was too excited about their potential. But I want to win this year, as do you. And I think that trade for Justin Turner is indicative of that and was a very, very smart trade, even if Sanchez ends up being great. The one other thought on that trade is just that I feel like Sanchez, his highest potential, maybe like 90th percentile season, is something that you can find elsewhere, right? It's not something that's necessarily worth keeping. So I applaud you on that trade. I think that was a great trade. But it's fascinating. I wish we could get all 16 owners and have this conversation with them about what goes through their mind when it comes to keeping players and declaring keepers, because it's not an easy one.
No.
I wonder how many spreadsheets we've each made to try to figure it out, right?
I have sketches, I have charts, I have colors.
Exactly.
I've had this like sketch I made on my break when I was just like doodling, and like I had like Shohei in the middle and I had like these stars coming off. She's like, "What does this mean, Aaron?" Laura's like, "What does this mean?" I'm like, "He's my star."
Right.
He's in the middle. Like it all comes.
I go from.
It was an interpretive sketch of my roster.
I love it. I go from the spreadsheet and the SQL database and all of the numbers to going back to this, because this is what I most can you see? Hold on, I can't get it. This is just it's literally a notebook with 3 columns and all the starting pitcher or all the starters starting positions sketched out. So first column is starters, second column is bench, and third column is minor leagues. And I've been doing that for 30 years almost, but it's the easiest way for me to look at it and visually conceptualize. Anyways, super fun.
I agree with that. It's something about looking at it, like it helps, like going through the practice and stepping back and like looking at it. It's like I'll have sometimes I'll like have a takeaway from like, oh, it's very clear now. Right. It's like it's on my head, it's on paper, I can see it.
Right. You can't see it right now because it's blurred out, but I also have a whiteboard behind me with each position and players that I would potentially target at each position, so that as I'm going through my research, I can keep notes of players that I enjoy. But yeah, this process is this year-long process is a lot of the enjoyment, I think, for all of us in fantasy baseball. My open form question for you is, do you have a favorite type of baseball game? Meaning, are you a pitcher's duel guy? Are you a home run derby guy? What's your favorite type of baseball game to watch? And then do you have a ballpark that fits that type of game? And then finally, do you have a dream ballpark that you'd love to go watch a ball game in? And I think I kind of asked that question before, but I'd like to ask it again.
Yeah, I do. I have pretty clear answers, I think, on this one. So I love pitcher's duel. So like for 2022, I would love to go to San Francisco. I've never seen that park by the water. So I would love to go see a pitcher's duel, Walker Buehler versus Rodon in San Francisco.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm in the same boat. I much prefer a pitcher's duel over a home run derby game. 10 out of 10 times, 1-0 game or 1-0, 0-0, 2-1 game going into the 8th and 9th. Potentially watching dominant relievers out there. Super fun. And then dream ballpark. I've been to most of the ballparks that I would dream about. So been to Oracle, San Francisco, been to Fenway, been to Wrigley, been to Yankee Stadium. I think I wish that I was a kid in the mid 80s and could have watched the Royals Cardinals World Series in those parks, you know, with all the fast players and playing on turf. I miss those days of that style of baseball. And I think I fell off a little bit in the early 2000s because not because I didn't love baseball, but because the style was so home run heavy. But it's interesting. I know that you're a pitcher guy, and I assume that was going to be your answer. But one of the beauties of baseball is you could watch a pitcher's duel one night and it be done in 2 hours and 20 minutes, and it'd be a phenomenal watch, and then watch a 12-10 game the next night, and it could be equally fun and go for 4.5 hours. Baseball is just like that. It takes each game takes on its own personality.
What I like about the pitcher's duel is there's so much tension when, like, you know, if there's first and third with 1 out, you know what I mean, in the 6th or 7th inning, and it's a 1-0 ball game or something like that, where that the batter pitcher dynamic, there's so much tension, right? Because it's like he can't give up fly ball, it's a sac fly. He can get it out of it with a double play. Does he get a strikeout and get 2 outs? And that do they bring the infield in? Like it just imbues so much like stress and just matchup, like one-on-one and strategy. I really like that those sort of situations are more prevalent in a really tight game, in a really well pitched game.
Well, in pitch,
it's enjoyable to watch.
Maybe my favorite part of watching a baseball game is pitch execution. And so you go in those close pitching duels, you go into it and not executing a slider, even it could be an 0-2 slider, but not executing an 0-2 slider could lead you to lose the game. You could pitch a beautiful game up to that point in time, but you hang a slider 0-2 and the major league hitter hits it out, right? Or, you know, you're trying to throw a high fastball with a 1-2 count and you miss your spot, it's game over. And so those sorts of things, the level of execution, and to your point, the level of tension and stress and in those high leverage situations is just fun. That's why we go. Again, it's why baseball is beautiful. You can walk around the stadium for the first 7 innings and enjoy it, but take in the scenery and the smells and the food and all those things. But those last couple of innings in a close game, you better sit your butt down and watch because of the tension and the high drama. Super.
Yeah.
Cool, man. You got anything else? What are you looking forward to this week?
We have a special section.
Oh yeah, let's do it. So what kind of cards are they?
So I was not able to go back and get the cards that I saw on Target the other day. They were sold out. However, I did order a box set of those cards that will be here this week.
Oh, you did? No way.
I did. So I have 140 2022 current major leaguers coming. It's a 7-pack, 20 cards each.
That's
But
awesome.
what I got instead of these, it's a 2021 Topps Heritage. So these are classic players.
Yeah.
So I have not opened this yet. So
Oh,
we're
you
going to do
haven't?
it on.
No
I
way.
haven't. I'm taking them out right now on air. All right. So the first one here, we got a count. Can you see that? You can't.
A little bit.
It's a kind of a classic looking, kind of silly looking border.
Uh-huh.
Like it's a Michael Waka
Oh, jeez.
Mets.
Hey, put it up close and see if we can see it. Yeah, I can see
Is
it.
it blurry?
Yeah, you can see it. See the picture at least.
Did they give me the year? Michael's 2020 highlight was relieving the injured Jacob deGrom and hurling 4 innings of 1-run ball and a come from behind win over the Phillies. This kept the Mets' postseason hopes alive. I didn't remember he was with the Mets that year.
Red Sox this year, probably number 5.
All right, here we go. We got 2021 rookie stars, American League, Tristan McKenzie and Chris Bubich.
Wait, Bubich is a star?
2020 rookie stars.
Okay, they're using that word pretty liberally.
Oh shit. Christian Yelich.
Your boy. Is he hitting the ball into the ground?
He's not. He just swung and he's looking up. So it looks like the ball went into the air that time.
That must be a pose.
That must be photoshopped.
That's your boy.
Eloy Jimenez.
Nice. Is he healthy?
He's holding the bat and his arm is intact.
Okay, it's a start.
Lucas Sims.
Oh, he's hurt. It's too bad.
Yeah, we liked him like 2 weeks ago.
Art Warren. He's on the way.
KBO All-Star Josh Lindblom.
Nice. That's a story for another pod, but just for the listeners, Aaron and I spent a good deal of the beginnings of COVID in 2020 playing simulation games independently and then watching either over Skype or just texting, watching KBO games in the middle of the night. It was a pretty fun time, way to pass the time. But we'll share that in detail on another.
So we're getting to the Aaron and Tino TGFBI All-Star. Are you ready? Vital Marte.
Nice.
And Chad Green.
Nice.
One of our releases. And then we have Smurfatron's Teoscar Hernandez.
Oh geez. Nice.
He's willing to trade him, by the way.
I'm sure he is.
Back to the TGFBI All-Stars, Aaron Nola.
Awesome. Who gave up an absolute bomb to Aurelvis Martinez yesterday in spring training, by the way. I don't know if you watched that.
I did see it.
800-foot home run or whatever it was.
New Marlin Jorge Soler.
Nice.
New
Is that Adam Duvall plus? Is that what the name says there?
Is he just going to DH or is he going to play the field?
I bet he DHs 80% of the time.
Okay. We got the new Blue Jay, Matt Chapman.
Nice. He's striking out in the picture.
So he had home run as well. Hope abounds. What I'm realizing that these are 2021 players or 2020 players with an old card design. That's what I'm realizing. Future Hall of Famer, Yadi Molina.
Nice.
And a player neither of us likes, Ryan Mountcastle.
Oh, at the very end.
I'll have to mail that to Patrick.
They should have a picture of Mountcastle flying out to left with the new fences to the warning track.
That's pretty good. So we got some TGFBI players. Yeah, that's pretty cool. This card design is not great, but that was fun.
We should alternate and bring a pack of cards to the pod.
Yeah, I was thinking about like mailing you half of the box so that we could each open half of them.
I've got a Walmart or something like that nearby. I'd go find some cards. Fun though. I like that. That's super fun.
All right.
Cool, man.
So for next time, I did pitching prospects, man. I did film work. I don't want to talk about it today, but
did you really for pitching prospects?
I did. I promised to bring one pitching prospect and it was on the agenda. So I did film work. I want you to know.
Why don't we, so
Whatever we can do
let's plan for Thursday. And maybe we do an hour or so just on young pitchers.
Okay, and then maybe some MLB news, because like we didn't talk about like Castellanos or Correa.
Totally.
So like to do like MLB camp free agent updates and then talk some young pitchers.
That sounds great. Awesome.
Okay,
Cool, man. I love it.
good talk. Bye.
All right.